Veronica Hayes stood in the gleaming lobby of Aurelio's, the most expensive restaurant in the city, looking like she had just crawled out of a swamp. Thick brown mud caked her green dress, streaked across her face, and matted into her curly black hair. Her hands trembled as she clutched her small purse, the only thing that had somehow stayed clean. Every eye in the lobby turned toward her. The hostess froze mid-smile, her expression shifting from welcome to horror. "I have a reservation," Veronica said quietly, her voice barely steady. "Table for two. Under Mitchell." The hostess blinked twice, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I'm sorry, but perhaps you'd like to reschedule?" Before Veronica could respond, a tall white man in an impeccably tailored navy suit appeared from the dining room. Brandon Mitchell looked exactly like his photo from the dating app. Sharp jawline, dark brown hair perfectly styled, gray eyes that held intelligence and caution in equal measure. He stopped dead when he saw her. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Veronica watched his eyes travel from her mud-covered shoes up to her face, where a smear of dirt crossed her cheek. His expression shifted from shock to confusion, then to what looked like disappointment. He took one step backward. "Mr. Mitchell," the hostess said quickly, relief flooding her voice. "Perhaps this is a mistake. I can call security if—" "No," Veronica interrupted, lifting her chin despite the humiliation burning through her chest. "I know how this looks. I know you want to leave. But please, just give me 2 minutes to explain." Brandon's hand was already reaching for his phone, probably to call his driver. His jaw tightened, and Veronica could see him calculating the fastest exit strategy. But then his eyes met hers and something made him pause. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice. Maybe it was the way her hands shook. Or maybe it was the fact that despite being covered in filth, she still showed up. 2 minutes, he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. He gestured toward a private corner of the lobby, away from the staring diners. "But we're not going to the table like this." Veronica nodded, grateful tears threatening to spill. She followed him to the corner, acutely aware of the mud dripping from her dress onto the pristine marble floor. A trail of dirty footprints marked her path. She wanted to disappear into the earth itself. Brandon crossed his arms, maintaining a careful distance. "I've heard a lot of excuses for being late to dates, but this is new. So please enlighten me. What possible explanation could there be for showing up like this?" The disgust in his voice wasn't even hidden. Veronica took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze directly. She would not apologize for what she had done. She would not feel shame for choosing to help. "I was on my way here," she began, her voice growing stronger. "I was actually early. I had plenty of time. I was wearing a different dress, a nice one. My hair was done. I looked presentable, I promise." Brandon raised one eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. But he didn't interrupt. Then I heard screaming. A child's voice, terrified, calling for help. It was coming from the construction site 2 blocks from here. Veronica's hands clenched around her purse. "There's this drainage ditch there, deep and full of muddy water from yesterday's rain. A little boy had fallen in while playing. He was stuck, sinking deeper, and he couldn't get out." The skepticism in Brandon's eyes began to shift, but Veronica couldn't read his expression clearly. She continued, the words tumbling out faster now. "His mother was screaming, trying to climb down, but the sides were too slippery. Other people were calling 911, but the boy was panicking, going under the water. He was maybe 6 years old, Brandon. 6. And he was drowning in mud and dirty water while everyone just stood there waiting for help to arrive." Brandon's arms slowly uncrossed. He took a small step closer. "So I climbed down," Veronica said simply. "I didn't think about my dress or my hair or this date or anything else. I couldn't stand there and watch a child drown. I couldn't do it. The mud was thick and cold and I kept slipping, but I reached him. I pulled him up and held him above the water until a construction worker brought a ladder." She looked down at her ruined dress, at the mud still drying on her arms. "By the time I got him out and made sure he was okay with his mother, I realized what time it was. I thought about going home to change, but I live 40 minutes away and I knew you'd be waiting. I thought if I just explained." Her voice cracked slightly. "I know how this looks. I know what you're thinking. That I'm crazy or irresponsible or making this whole thing up. But I couldn't let a child die, Brandon. I just couldn't. And I couldn't stand you up without at least trying to explain why I look like this." The silence that followed felt eternal. Veronica waited for him to turn and walk away, to laugh in her face, to accuse her of lying. She had used her 2 minutes. The ball was in his court now. Brandon stared at her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. Then, slowly, something in his expression softened. The hard edges of disgust and annoyance melted into something else. Something that looked almost like wonder. "You saved a child's life," he said quietly. It wasn't a question but a statement, as if he was testing the words on his tongue. "You were on your way to meet me, a complete stranger who happens to be wealthy and could potentially change your life, and you stopped to save a drowning child." "Yes," Veronica said simply. "What else could I do?" Brandon laughed then, but it wasn't cruel. It was surprised, almost delighted. He ran a hand through his perfect hair, messing it up for the first time since she'd seen him. "What else could you do?" he repeated, shaking his head. "Most people would have kept walking. Most people would have waited for professionals. Most people would have protected their expensive dress and their important date." "I'm not most people," Veronica said quietly. "No," Brandon agreed, his eyes locked on hers. "You're certainly not." He pulled out his phone and Veronica's heart sank. This was it. He was calling his driver, ending this disaster of an evening. She had known it was too much to hope for understanding. But instead of making a call, Brandon typed something quickly. Then he looked up at her, and there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I have a penthouse 10 minutes from here," he said. "It has several bathrooms, clean clothes that my housekeeper keeps for guests, and probably the best shower you've ever experienced. I'm going to take you there so you can clean up properly. Then we're going to have dinner, maybe not here but somewhere nice. And you're going to tell me everything about this rescue in detail." Veronica blinked, certain she had misheard. "You want to continue the date?" "I don't want to continue this date," Brandon corrected, his mouth curving into the first real smile she'd seen from him. "I want to start it over properly. Because if you're willing to sacrifice this much to help a stranger, I need to know what kind of person does that. And I need to hear this story from the beginning." Relief flooded through Veronica so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. "You believe me?" "I believe you," Brandon said firmly. He held out his hand, not caring about the mud. "Come on. My car is outside. And Veronica, thank you for showing up. Muddy or not, you showed up. That tells me more about your character than any pristine appearance ever could." Veronica took his hand, feeling the warmth of his fingers close around hers. For the first time since climbing out of that ditch, she felt like maybe, just maybe, this disaster might turn into something beautiful. As they walked through the lobby together, mud and all, Veronica caught the hostess's shocked expression. But she didn't care anymore. Brandon Mitchell, Billionaire CEO, the man who could have any woman in the city, was holding her hand and smiling at her like she was the most interesting person he had ever met. And all it took was showing up covered in mud with a story of kindness. The doorman held open the glass door, trying not to stare. A sleek black car waited at the curb, the driver already opening the back door. Brandon helped Veronica inside, not caring that mud would stain the leather seats. He slid in beside her, and the door closed, sealing them in comfortable silence. "The boy," Brandon said as the car pulled into traffic. "Is he okay?" "Tommy," Veronica said softly. "His name is Tommy Rodriguez. He's fine. Scared cold but fine. The paramedics checked him out. His mother was crying so hard she could barely speak, but she kept hugging him and hugging me." Brandon nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "You know his name?" "Of course I know his name," Veronica said, surprised. "I wasn't going to rescue a child and not make sure he was truly okay." That smile returned to Brandon's face, wider this time. "Of course you weren't." The car glided through the city streets, and Veronica watched the lights blur past the window. Her heart was still racing, but now it wasn't from fear or embarrassment. It was from the impossible hope that this man, this successful, handsome man, might actually understand who she was. "Can I ask you something?" Brandon said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Anything. Why didn't you go home to change? You said you live 40 minutes away, but even showing up late and clean would have been better than this, from a conventional standpoint." Veronica considered the question carefully. "Because I thought about how I would feel if I were you. Sitting in that restaurant, waiting, checking my watch, wondering if I'd been stood up. I thought about how it feels to be forgotten or dismissed. And I couldn't do that to you even if you were a stranger. Even if showing up like this meant you'd reject me immediately. At least you'd know I tried. At least you'd know you mattered enough for me to show up, no matter how I looked." The car fell silent except for the soft hum of the engine. When Veronica finally looked at Brandon, she saw something in his expression that took her breath away. It was vulnerability, raw and real, as if her words had reached something deep inside him that rarely saw light. "No one has ever said something like that to me before," he said quietly. "In my world, people are very concerned with appearances. With saying the right things, wearing the right clothes, being seen in the right places. But actually caring about how someone else feels? That's rare. Before Veronica could respond, the car pulled up to a towering building of glass and steel. The doorman rushed to open the car door, his eyes widening at Veronica's appearance but his professional mask never slipping. "Good evening, Mr. Mitchell," he said smoothly. "Evening, Thomas," Brandon replied, helping Veronica out of the car. "We'll be heading straight up." The lobby was all marble and soft lighting, expensive art on the walls and fresh flowers on every surface. Veronica felt acutely out of place, leaving muddy footprints on the pristine floor. But Brandon kept his hand on her elbow, guiding her toward a private elevator, his presence radiating confidence that made her feel protected rather than exposed. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in a space that felt suddenly intimate. Brandon pressed the button for the top floor, and the elevator began its smooth ascent. "I should probably warn you," he said, a hint of nervousness entering his voice for the first time. "My place is, well, it's a lot. I know that sounds arrogant, but I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." Veronica looked at him, this powerful man who suddenly seemed uncertain. "Brandon, I'm currently covered in mud and standing in your private elevator. I think we're past the point of uncomfortable." He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "That's fair." The elevator stopped, opening directly into a penthouse that took Veronica's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the entire city spread out like a sea of lights. The space was open and modern, all clean lines and expensive furniture, but somehow it didn't feel cold. Personal touches were everywhere. Books stacked on tables, a guitar in the corner, photographs on shelves. "This is your home," Veronica said softly, taking it all in. "This is where I live," Brandon corrected. "I'm hoping to figure out how to make it feel like a home." There was a loneliness in those words that made Veronica's heart ache. But before she could respond, Brandon was already moving toward a hallway. "Come on," he said. "The guest bathroom is this way. There should be plenty of towels and I'll have my housekeeper's daughter bring up some clothes. She keeps a wardrobe here for emergencies. You two look about the same size." He opened a door to reveal a bathroom that was bigger than Veronica's entire bedroom. The shower alone looked like something from a spa, all glass and chrome with multiple shower heads. Fluffy white towels were stacked on warming racks, and expensive soaps and lotions lined the shelves. "Take your time," Brandon said gently. "Really take as long as you need. I'll order some food to be delivered and we can eat here if that's okay. Somewhere more comfortable than a stuffy restaurant." Veronica turned to face him, overwhelmed by his kindness. "Brandon, you don't have to do all this. I showed up to our date looking like a swamp creature. You could have just left." "But you showed up," he repeated, his eyes intense. "You saved a child's life and then you showed up anyway because you didn't want me to feel forgotten. That kind of person deserves more than rejection, Veronica. That kind of person deserves kindness and patience and understanding." His words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. "Thank you," she whispered. "For believing me. For helping me. For all of this." "Thank me after you've had that shower," Brandon said with a smile. "I have a feeling you're going to be thanking the water pressure more than me." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Veronica stood alone in the luxurious bathroom, staring at her reflection in the huge mirror. Mud streaked across her face, her hair was a disaster, and her green dress was completely ruined. But her eyes were bright, alive with something that felt like hope. She had saved Tommy Rodriguez's life. And now, impossibly, this evening might be saved too. What would you have done? Would you have stopped to help, even if it meant ruining your one chance at something special? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about people who choose kindness over convenience. ****. The hot water cascaded over Veronica's skin, washing away layers of dried mud and revealing her rich brown complexion beneath. She stood under the multiple shower heads, letting the tension drain from her muscles as steam filled the enormous bathroom. The water pressure was incredible, just as Brandon had promised, but her mind wasn't on the luxury surrounding her. Instead, she was back at that construction site, hearing Tommy's terrified screams. It had been 3:30 in the afternoon when she'd left her apartment. She had given herself plenty of time, wanting to arrive at Aurelio's early, calm and collected. The blind date had been set up by her best friend Regina, who worked as an assistant at Mitchell Industries and had been pestering Veronica for months to meet her boss. "He's lonely, you're lonely, and you're both good people," Regina had insisted. "Just one date. What's the worst that could happen?" Veronica smiled sadly at the memory as she worked shampoo through her hair. Regina would never believe what had actually happened. She had been walking down Riverside Avenue, her heels clicking on the pavement, when she'd heard the screaming. At first she'd thought it was children playing, the shrieks of delight that often filled the playground nearby. But something about the pitch made her stop, made her listen more carefully. "Help. Someone help my baby. Please." The desperate cry of a mother was unmistakable. Veronica had spun around, searching for the source. Other pedestrians had stopped too, confusion on their faces. Then she'd seen them, a small crowd gathering near the construction fence, people pointing and shouting. Veronica had run toward the commotion, her heart already racing. The construction site was supposed to be secured, but a section of fence had been pushed aside, probably by kids looking for a place to explore. Beyond it, the ground had been excavated for a new building's foundation, creating deep trenches and channels. Yesterday's heavy rain had filled these with muddy water, turning them into dangerous traps. And in one of these trenches a little boy was drowning. The memory made Veronica's hands shake as she rinsed the conditioner from her hair. She could still see Tommy's face, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in screams that became gurgles as muddy water splashed over him. He had been trying to climb the slippery sides of the ditch, but every attempt just made him sink deeper into the thick mud at the bottom. His mother, Rosa Rodriguez, had been on her knees at the edge, reaching down with arms that couldn't possibly reach far enough. Her screams were raw, animal sounds of a parent watching their child die. "Someone call 911, a man in a business suit had been shouting into his phone. "The fire department is coming," another woman called out. But Veronica had done the math instantly. The ditch was at least 12 feet deep. Tommy was small, maybe 6 years old, and the mud was pulling him down. The water was dark and dirty, filled with construction debris. Every second counted, and help was minutes away. She'd kicked off her heels. "What are you doing?" someone had asked as Veronica climbed over the broken fence. "Getting him out," she'd replied simply. The ground at the edge of the ditch had been slick with rain and mud. Veronica had positioned herself carefully, looking for the safest way down. There wasn't one. The sides were nearly vertical, slick with wet clay. "Lady, you'll kill yourself," the businessman had warned. Rosa had looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she'd whispered. "Please save my Tommy." Veronica had met her eyes and nodded. Then she'd sat down at the edge and pushed herself over. Now, standing in Brandon's shower, Veronica closed her eyes and remembered the sickening slide down the muddy slope. Her dress had caught on rocks and roots, ripping and tearing. Her hands had scraped against the rough sides as she tried to control her descent. The mud had been cold and thick, nothing like the warm water now surrounding her. She'd hit the bottom hard, her feet plunging into mud that came up to her knees. The smell had been overwhelming, stagnant water, rotting vegetation, and chemicals from the construction site. Tommy had been 6 feet away from her, his head barely above water, his small hands clawing at the mud. "I've got you," Veronica had called out, fighting through the thick mud toward him. "Tommy, look at me. I've got you." The boy's eyes had locked onto hers, desperate and trusting in a way that had broken her heart. He'd been wearing a bright red shirt and blue jeans, both now covered in brown sludge. As Veronica had reached him, she'd realized how cold the water was. Tommy's lips had been turning blue. "I've got you, baby," she'd repeated, wrapping her arms around his small body and lifting him up. He'd clung to her like a lifeline, his fingers digging into her shoulders. "You're safe now. I won't let go." But getting him out had been the hard part. Veronica turned off the shower and reached for one of the soft towels, wrapping it around herself. The mirror had steamed up, hiding her reflection. She wiped a clear spot and looked at herself, remembering how scared she'd been in that moment, holding Tommy in the freezing water with no clear way up. The sides of the ditch had been too steep and slippery to climb while carrying a child. Every time Veronica had tried to get a foothold, the mud had given way beneath her feet. Tommy had been shivering violently, his teeth chattering. "Cold?" he'd whimpered. "I want my mama." "We're getting back to mama right now," Veronica had promised, though she'd had no idea how. Then she'd heard the shout from above. "Hey, grab this." A construction worker had appeared at the edge, a sturdy man in an orange vest and hard hat. He'd been carrying a ladder. With help from the businessman and another bystander, he'd lowered it into the ditch. "Can you climb with the kid?" he'd called down. Veronica had looked at the ladder, at Tommy, at the steep sides. "I can try." It had been the hardest physical thing she'd ever done. With Tommy wrapped around her front, clinging to her neck, Veronica had started up the ladder. Her arms had shaken with effort. Her feet had slipped on the muddy rungs. Tommy's weight had thrown off her balance, making every step precarious. "You can do it," the construction worker had encouraged from above. "One step at a time." Halfway up, Veronica's foot had slipped completely off a rung. For one terrifying second she'd thought they would both fall back into the water. Tommy had screamed. But somehow she'd held on, her fingers white-knuckled on the ladder, her muscles burning. "I've got you, Tommy," she'd gasped. "I won't let you fall." She'd made it to the top through sheer determination and the help of the construction worker, who'd reached down to grab Tommy and pull him up the last few feet. Then he'd help Veronica over the edge. The moment they'd reached solid ground, Rosa had rushed forward and swept Tommy into her arms, sobbing. The boy had clung to his mother, crying hard, but he'd been alive. Safe. Breathing. Veronica had collapsed onto the ground, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Other people had gathered around, wrapping emergency blankets around both Tommy and her. Someone had given her water. The paramedics had arrived minutes later, checking both of them thoroughly. "You saved his life," one paramedic had told Veronica as he'd examined the scrapes on her hands. "Another few minutes and hypothermia would have set in. He might not have made it." Those words had made everything worth it. The ruined dress, the scratches, the mud, all of it had been worth seeing Tommy breathing and crying in his mother's arms. Rosa had approached her before the ambulance left, tears still streaming down her face. "Thank you," she'd whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for my son. I don't know who you are, but you are an angel. You saved my Tommy's life." Veronica had hugged her tightly, careful of Tommy still wrapped in Rosa's arms. "I'm just glad I was here. Keep him safe. Always," Rosa had promised. Then she'd looked at Veronica's ruined appearance and frowned with concern. "But look at you. You're hurt. You need to be checked." "I'm fine," Veronica had assured her. "Really? Take care of Tommy. That's what matters." After the ambulance had left with Tommy and Rosa inside, Veronica had finally checked the time on her phone. 5:15. She'd had 45 minutes to get to Aurelio's for her 6 o'clock date with Brandon Mitchell. The choice had been obvious but painful. Go home, shower, change, and arrive an hour late with no explanation that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Or go directly to the restaurant, looking like she'd lost a fight with a swamp, and hope for understanding. She'd chosen honesty over appearance. She'd chosen showing up over perfection. And somehow, miraculously, Brandon had understood. Now Veronica dried herself with the luxurious towels and examined the clothes that had been left outside the bathroom door while she'd been showering. A simple but elegant blue dress, soft and comfortable. Clean undergarments, still with tags on them. Even a pair of shoes that looked like they might actually fit. She dressed quickly, grateful for the kindness of a stranger's housekeeper. The blue dress hugged her curves perfectly, falling just above her knees. It felt wonderful to be clean, to feel human again. She found a comb and worked through her natural curls, letting them frame her face in soft waves. When she finally emerged from the bathroom, she found Brandon in the kitchen area of the open-plan living space. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a green sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. He was setting out plates and glasses, preparing for the meal he'd ordered. He looked up when he heard her, and his eyes widened. "Wow," he said simply. Veronica felt heat rise to her cheeks. "The dress is beautiful. Thank your housekeeper for me." "I will, but the beauty is all you," Brandon said, then looked embarrassed by his own words. "Sorry, that was cheesy." "It was sweet," Veronica corrected, smiling. Brandon gestured to the dining area, where he'd set up candles and laid out what looked like an impressive spread of food. "I ordered from 3 different restaurants because I didn't know what you'd like. Italian, Thai, and good old American comfort food. Take your pick or try everything." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Veronica deeply. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," Brandon said firmly. "Veronica, what you did today. I need to hear the whole story. Not the summarized version you told me in the restaurant lobby, but everything. What made you climb into that ditch? How did you get Tommy out? All of it." So she told him. As they sat down to eat, Veronica walked him through every moment of the rescue. She described the fear in Tommy's eyes, the desperation in Rosa's voice, the cold bite of the muddy water, and the burning in her muscles as she'd climbed that ladder. Brandon listened with complete attention, his food forgotten. When she described nearly falling off the ladder halfway up, his hand moved across the table to cover hers. "You could have died," he said quietly. "But Tommy would have died for certain if I'd done nothing," Veronica replied. "How do you live with yourself after that? How do you walk away from a child in danger?" "Most people do," Brandon said. Most people would have waited for the professionals. Would have been too scared or too concerned about themselves. Then I guess I'm not most people, Veronica said, echoing her earlier words. Brandon squeezed her hand gently. No, you're definitely not. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily now that the barrier of first date awkwardness had been demolished by mud and rescue and honesty. Veronica found herself genuinely enjoying Brandon's company. He was intelligent and funny, asking thoughtful questions about her work as a social worker and seeming genuinely interested in the answers. So you do this kind of thing regularly? He asked. Help people in crisis? It's my job, Veronica said simply. I work with families who are struggling. Sometimes that's helping them navigate the welfare system, sometimes it's connecting them with resources, sometimes it's just being there to listen. I don't usually jump into muddy ditches though. That was a first. Brandon laughed. I would hope so. As the evening wore on, Veronica realized something wonderful. This wasn't just a successful save from a disastrous beginning. This was actually going well. Brandon was kind, attentive, and surprisingly easy to talk to. The wealth and power that surrounded him seemed to fade into the background, revealing a person who was lonely and searching for connection, just like she was. Can I ask you something personal? Veronica said as they moved to the comfortable couches near the windows, the city lights twinkling below them. After everything tonight, I think we're past the point of holding back, Brandon said with a smile. Regina told me you're lonely. That despite everything you have, you're looking for something real. Is that true? Brandon was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying the view. Yes, he finally said. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I have a successful company, respect in my industry, everything society says should make me happy. But at the end of the day, I come home to this empty apartment and wonder what it's all for. Everyone who comes into my life wants something from me. My money, my connections, my influence. No one just wants me. The vulnerability in his voice made Veronica's heart ache. I don't want anything from you, Brandon. Just so we're clear. I'm here because Regina thought we might connect, and because I believe in giving people a chance. But I don't need your money or your influence. I have my own life, my own purpose. I know, Brandon said, turning to look at her. That's what makes you different. That's what made you show up covered in mud rather than stand me up. You see people as people, not as opportunities. That's rare in my world, Veronica. That's incredibly rare. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city below. Then Brandon spoke again, his voice thoughtful. Tell me about your work. Tell me about the families you help. I want to understand what drives you. So Veronica told him about her job, about the single mothers struggling to feed their children, the families one paycheck away from homelessness, the kids who fell through the cracks of an overburdened system. She told him about the victories and the heartbreaks, the policies that helped and the ones that hurt, the daily battle to make a difference in a world that often felt too broken to fix. Brandon listened to every word, and by the end, there was a fire in his eyes that Veronica hadn't seen before. What if we could help them? He said suddenly. Really help them, not just with temporary solutions but with real, lasting change? What do you mean? Veronica asked. But Brandon was already standing, pacing the room with the energy of someone struck by inspiration. I've been looking for something meaningful to do with my resources. Something beyond just making more money. What if we started a foundation? What if we used my business connections and capital to create real programs for families like the ones you work with? Veronica's heart began to race. Brandon, do you know what something like that could do? How many people it could help? Tell me, he said, his eyes bright. Tell me exactly what you'd do if money and resources weren't an obstacle. And so Veronica did, her words tumbling out in an excited rush as she described her dreams of community centers, job training programs, affordable childcare, education support, and all the things that could lift families out of poverty permanently rather than just helping them survive day to day. Brandon listened to it all, nodding, asking questions, his mind clearly working through the logistics and possibilities. By the time Veronica finished talking, it was past midnight. They had spent hours discussing, planning, dreaming about what could be possible. Let's do it, Brandon said finally. Let's build this together. Your expertise, my resources. We could actually make a difference, Veronica. A real, measurable difference. Tears welled in Veronica's eyes. You're serious. Completely serious, Brandon confirmed. Today you showed me what real courage and compassion look like. You jumped into a muddy ditch to save a stranger's child without a second thought. If you can do that, I can do this. I can use what I have to help people who need it. And I need someone like you to guide me, to make sure we're doing real good and not just throwing money at problems. Veronica stood and walked to where Brandon was standing by the windows. You're really willing to do this? To commit to helping people you've never met? You did exactly that today, Brandon pointed out. You taught me something important, Veronica. You showed me that being willing to get muddy, to sacrifice your own comfort and plans, to put others first. That's what real wealth looks like. Not money in a bank account. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Then yes, let's do this together. Let's build something beautiful. Brandon smiled, the loneliness that had shadowed his eyes earlier now replaced with purpose and excitement. Best blind date ever, he said with a laugh. Veronica laughed too, the sound bright and genuine. Even though I showed up looking like a swamp monster? Especially because of that, Brandon said seriously. Because it showed me exactly who you are. And who you are, Veronica Hayes, is someone extraordinary. The city lights sparkled below them like a sea of stars as Veronica and Brandon stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, their hands still clasped together. The moment felt suspended in time, full of possibility and promise. Veronica's heart beat steadily in her chest, a rhythm that seemed to match the quiet excitement building between them. I should probably get home, Veronica said softly, though she made no move to leave. It's late and you must be tired. I'm not tired at all, Brandon admitted. Actually, I feel more awake than I have in months. But if you need to go, I understand. Let me call my driver to take you home. Veronica hesitated. The practical part of her knew she should leave, should end this magical evening before reality crashed back in. But another part of her, the part that had learned to recognize rare and precious moments when they appeared, wanted to stay just a little longer. Actually, she said slowly, I'd love to stay and talk more about the foundation. That's okay. We could sketch out some ideas, think about next steps. The smile that lit up Brandon's face was answer enough. I was hoping you'd say that. Come on, I have a whole office set up here. We can brainstorm properly. He led her to a room off the main living area that served as his home office. Unlike the sleek modernity of the rest of the penthouse, this space felt personal. Books lined the walls, a comfortable leather chair sat behind a large desk, and photographs of various business ventures and charitable events decorated the shelves. Brandon pulled up a second chair to the desk and opened his laptop. Okay, let's start with the basics. What's the first thing families like the Rodriguez family need most? Veronica settled into the chair, her mind already organizing the endless needs she encountered daily in her work. Stability, she said without hesitation. Most of the families I work with are living in survival mode, one crisis away from disaster. They need stable housing, reliable income, and access to resources that can help them build a foundation for their lives. Brandon typed notes as she spoke. What about education? Job training? Those are crucial, Veronica agreed, but they only work if the basic needs are met first. A mother can't focus on job training if she doesn't know where her kids will sleep tonight or how they'll eat tomorrow. We need to think about this holistically. Housing assistance, food security, healthcare access, childcare support, and then education and job opportunities. That's a lot of moving parts, Brandon said thoughtfully. But not impossible. What if we started with a pilot program? One community, maybe where the Rodriguez family lives. We could develop a model that works and then expand from there. Veronica felt excitement building in her chest. That's smart. Test and refine before scaling up. The neighborhood where Tommy lives is actually perfect. It's struggling, but there's a strong community spirit there. People help each other. They just need resources. They talked for hours, Brandon asking questions and Veronica providing insights from her years of frontline experience. He was impressed by how thoroughly she understood not just the problems, but the complex systems that created and perpetuated them. She was equally impressed by how quickly he grasped the issues and started thinking strategically about solutions. What about a community center? Brandon suggested around 2 a.m. A physical space where families could access multiple services in one place. Job counseling, legal aid, healthcare referrals, childcare, education programs. We could make it welcoming and safe, a real hub for the community. Veronica's eyes lit up. Yes, that's exactly what's needed. Most families have to navigate a dozen different agencies in different locations just to access basic services. Having everything in one place would remove so many barriers. Brandon made more notes, his fingers flying across the keyboard. We could buy a building in the neighborhood, renovate it, make it beautiful and functional. Hire local people to work there, pump money back into the community economy. And we'd need to hire social workers, counselors, teachers, Veronica added. People who understand the community and can build real relationships with the families. Not just bureaucrats processing paperwork. People like you, Brandon said, looking up from his laptop. Veronica met his eyes. I have a job, Brandon. I can't just leave my current families. What if you didn't have to choose? Brandon asked. What if this foundation employed you to do exactly what you're already doing, but with better resources and less red tape? You could still work with your current families and help us build this program to reach even more people. The offer was tempting, almost overwhelmingly so. Brandon, you barely know me. You can't just offer me a job based on one evening together. Can't I? Brandon challenged gently. Veronica, in the past 6 hours, you've shown me more integrity, compassion, and expertise than most people I've known for years. You saved a child's life this afternoon. You showed up to our date anyway, covered in mud, because you didn't want to make me feel forgotten. You've spent the entire evening teaching me about problems I should have been paying attention to all along. If I can't trust you, who can I trust? Veronica felt tears prick her eyes. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. Tell me, Brandon said softly, closing his laptop and giving her his full attention. Tell me what you needed to hear. So Veronica opened up about her struggles. About working 60-hour weeks for low pay, about the constant battle against a system that seemed designed to exhaust people who cared. About watching families she'd helped slip back into crisis because there weren't enough resources or time to provide sustained support. About the guilt she carried every day, knowing that for every family she helped, 10 more needed her. I'm tired, Brandon, she admitted. I'm so tired of fighting alone. Of trying to patch holes in a sinking ship with bandages. I became a social worker because I wanted to change lives, but most days I feel like I'm just barely keeping people alive. Brandon reached across the desk and took her hand. You're not going to be alone anymore. I promise you that. We're going to build something together that actually works. That actually helps people not just survive but thrive. Why? Veronica asked, searching his face. Why do you care so much? You said you've been looking for meaning, but there are thousands of causes you could support. Why this? Why now? Brandon was quiet for a long moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Of course. I grew up poor, Brandon said quietly. Not as poor as many of the families you work with, but poor enough. My dad was a mechanic, my mom cleaned houses. We lived in a small apartment, and there were times when money was so tight that my parents skipped meals so I could eat. I watched them work themselves to exhaustion just to keep us afloat. Veronica squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. When I was 15, my dad got sick. Cancer. The medical bills destroyed us financially. We lost our apartment, had to move in with my aunt. My mom worked 3 jobs while also taking care of my dad. I watched them struggle, watched the system fail them over and over again. No one helped us. No one even noticed. What happened to your dad? Veronica asked gently. He died 2 years later, Brandon said, his voice thick with old grief. And after he was gone, my mom broke down. Not just emotionally but physically. All that work, all that stress, it caught up with her. She ended up in the hospital too. Brandon, I'm so sorry. That's when I decided I was going to be wealthy, Brandon continued. Not because I wanted luxury or status, but because I never wanted to be that helpless again. I never wanted to watch people I love suffer because they couldn't afford help. So I worked. I studied. I built businesses. I made money hand over fist. He looked out the window at the expensive view, his expression distant. And somewhere along the way I forgot why I started. I got caught up in the game of it all, in proving I could succeed. I surrounded myself with other wealthy people, dated women who saw me as a bank account, focused on making more money even though I already had more than I could ever need. I became the exact kind of person who would have walked past my struggling parents without a second glance. But you didn't walk past Tommy, Veronica pointed out. You didn't walk past me. Brandon turned back to her, his gray eyes intense. Because you reminded me. When you showed up covered in mud, when you told me about jumping into that ditch to save a child you'd never met, you reminded me of who I used to be. Of who I wanted to be. You reminded me that having wealth means having the power to help, and that if I'm not using that power, then what's the point of any of it? Veronica felt her heart expand in her chest. Your parents would be proud of you. They would be proud of this, Brandon corrected, gesturing at the notes on his laptop. Of what we're going to build together. Not of the money or the business success. Those were just tools. But using those tools to help families like mine? To prevent other kids from watching their parents suffer? That's what would make them proud. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared purpose settling over them like a warm blanket. Then Brandon smiled, the sadness leaving his eyes. "I think we need food," he declared. "Real food, not the picked-over dinner we abandoned hours ago. Are you hungry?" Now that he mentioned it, Veronica realized she was starving. "Very. Perfect. I make exceptional grilled cheese sandwiches. It's my one culinary skill." Veronica laughed. "A billionaire who cooks grilled cheese?" "A billionaire who learned to cook grilled cheese when he was 8 because his parents were working late and he was hungry," Brandon corrected with a grin. "Come on, let me show you my skills." They moved to the kitchen, and Veronica watched with amusement as Brandon gathered ingredients with focused determination. He wasn't kidding about it being his specialty. He pulled out artisanal bread, several types of cheese, butter, and various additions like tomatoes and basil. "You take your grilled cheese seriously," Veronica observed. "It's the one thing my mom taught me to cook before she got sick," Brandon explained as he heated a pan. "She said every person should know how to make at least one thing that brings comfort. For her, it was grilled cheese. She made them special with different cheeses and additions. She said food made with care could heal almost anything. She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was," Brandon agreed softly. "She would have liked you. She always said to look for people with kind eyes and brave hearts. You have both." Veronica felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. She watched him cook, noting how his careful attention to the simple task spoke of love and memory. When he plated the sandwiches, they were golden and perfect, the cheese melted to exactly the right consistency. They ate standing at the kitchen counter, and Veronica had to admit it was the best grilled cheese she'd ever tasted. The combination of cheeses was perfect, the bread crispy on the outside and soft inside, the addition of fresh tomato and basil elevating it from simple comfort food to something special. "Okay, you weren't kidding about your skills," she admitted. Brandon grinned. "Told you. It's my hidden talent." "What other hidden talents do you have?" Veronica asked teasingly. "Well, I play guitar badly, I can juggle 3 balls but not 4, and I know every word to every song from the musical Hamilton," Brandon replied seriously. "Very useful skills for a CO." Veronica laughed. "I'd like to hear the guitar playing sometime." "Trust me you wouldn't," Brandon said with a self-deprecating smile. "But I appreciate the vote of confidence." As they finished eating and cleaned up the kitchen together, Veronica marveled at how comfortable she felt. This was supposed to be a blind date with a powerful billionaire, something that should have been awkward and intimidating. Instead, it felt like spending time with an old friend, easy and natural. "Can I ask you something?" Brandon said as he dried the last plate. "Anything. When you were in that ditch with Tommy, when you were scared and cold and didn't know if you could get him out, what kept you going? What made you keep trying?" Veronica considered the question carefully. "I kept thinking about his mother. About Rosa watching from above, terrified that she was going to lose her child. I thought about how I would feel if I gave up, if I let fear win, and that boy died because I wasn't strong enough. I couldn't live with that. So I kept going because the alternative was unacceptable." Brandon nodded slowly. "That's how I want to approach this foundation. With that same commitment. The idea that giving up is unacceptable because too many people are depending on us to try." "Then that's exactly how we'll do it," Veronica promised. By the time Brandon finally called his driver to take Veronica home, it was nearly 4 in the morning. The sun would be rising soon, and they both had work in a few hours. But neither of them seemed to care about the lost sleep. "Thank you for tonight," Veronica said as they waited for the car in the lobby. "For understanding about the mud, for believing my story, for everything. This was the most unexpected and wonderful evening I've ever had." "Thank you for showing up," Brandon replied. "In every sense of the word. You showed up covered in mud because you cared more about my feelings than your appearance. You showed up with ideas and passion when I proposed the foundation. You showed up as yourself, honest and real. That's the best gift anyone has given me in years." The car pulled up outside and the driver stepped out to open the door. Brandon walked Veronica outside, not caring that he was in jeans and a sweater rather than his usual suit. "Can I see you again?" he asked, suddenly looking uncertain. "Soon? Maybe tomorrow, I mean today, after we both get some sleep?" Veronica smiled. "I'd like that. We have a foundation to plan after all. And maybe another date," Brandon added. "One where neither of us is covered in mud or falling asleep from exhaustion." "That sounds perfect." Brandon took her hand and raised it to his lips, kissing it gently. The gesture was old-fashioned but somehow exactly right. "Good night, Veronica." Or good morning, technically. "Good night, Brandon." She slid into the car, and as it pulled away from the curb, she looked back to see Brandon standing on the sidewalk, watching her go with a smile on his face. The billionaire CEO looked happy, truly happy, in a way that made Veronica's heart sing. As the car carried her through the early morning streets toward her modest apartment, Veronica reflected on the impossible evening. She had started the day planning a blind date. She'd saved a child's life. She'd arrived at an expensive restaurant covered in mud. And she'd ended the night planning a charitable foundation with a man who seemed to understand her in a way no one ever had. Life was strange and beautiful and full of unexpected moments. Tommy Rodriguez was safe with his mother. Brandon Mitchell had found purpose. And Veronica Hayes had found hope. It was enough to make her believe in destiny. Veronica managed 3 hours of sleep before her alarm jolted her awake. She groaned, reaching out to silence the persistent beeping, her body protesting the short rest. But despite the exhaustion, she couldn't stop smiling. Last night had been real. It had actually happened. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Brandon. Good morning. Hope you got some sleep. Coffee at 10? There's a quiet place near your office where we can talk more about the foundation. I'll send a car. Veronica typed back quickly. I can take the bus. You don't need to send a car. The response came immediately. I want to send the car. Please let me. It's not about showing off. I just want to make things easier for you. She smiled at the message, appreciating his thoughtfulness. Okay. Thank you. See you at 10. The morning passed in a blur. Veronica met with 3 families, helped a mother navigate the food assistance application process, and made calls to follow up on cases. Her coworkers noticed her good mood, the way she seemed to float through the usually draining work. Who are you and what did you do with stressed-out Veronica? Her colleague Donna asked over their shared desk. I had a really good night, Veronica admitted, unable to contain her smile. That blind date Regina set up? The billionaire. Veronica nodded. It was unexpected. In the best way. Details? Donna demanded. You can't just smile like that and not give details. But before Veronica could respond, her phone buzzed. The car had arrived. She grabbed her purse and jacket, leaving Donna calling after her for more information. The coffee shop Brandon had chosen was small and local, tucked away from the busy streets. Nothing fancy or pretentious, just a comfortable neighborhood spot with good coffee and quiet corners. Veronica found him already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He stood when he saw her, his face lighting up. He was back in a suit today, dark blue this time, but he'd lost some of the stiffness she'd noticed in their first meeting. He looked relaxed, happy. I ordered you a latte, he said. Regina told me that's your drink. But if you want something else. A latte is perfect, Veronica assured him, sliding into the seat across from him. You talked to Regina? She called me this morning, Brandon admitted with a laugh. Demanded to know what happened. Apparently, my assistant mentioned I was in an unusually good mood and Regina put 2 and 2 together. She texted me 6 times, Veronica said. I haven't responded yet. I figured I'd make her wait a little longer. They laughed together, the sound easy and comfortable. Brandon pulled out a tablet and opened it to reveal pages of notes. I couldn't sleep, he admitted. So I started researching. Community foundations, successful neighborhood revitalization programs, models that work and ones that don't. I have so many ideas. Veronica leaned forward, studying his notes with interest. You've been busy. I'm excited, Brandon said simply. I haven't been excited about anything in years. Well, anything besides quarterly earnings reports, which is depressing when I say it out loud. They spent the next hour going through his research, discussing possibilities and potential pitfalls. Brandon had done impressive work, identifying programs that had succeeded and analyzing why. Veronica added her practical knowledge, pointing out the gaps between what looked good on paper and what actually worked on the ground. The key is involving the community from the start, Veronica explained. Programs imposed from outside, even well-meaning ones, often fail because they don't address what people actually need. We need to talk to families, listen to them, let them help design the services. Brandon typed notes as she spoke. So we start with community meetings. Get input before we make any decisions. Exactly. And we need to hire from within the community whenever possible. Give people jobs, invest in local talent, show that we trust them to help build something for themselves. I love that, Brandon said, his eyes bright. It's not charity. It's partnership. Right. Charity creates dependency. Partnership creates strength. They talked until their coffee grew cold, until the lunch rush started filling the small shop. Finally, Brandon glanced at his watch and grimaced. I have a meeting in an hour. But I don't want to stop talking. We can continue later, Veronica said. I have families to see this afternoon anyway. Dinner? Brandon asked hopefully. A real dinner this time, where neither of us is exhausted and we can actually enjoy the food? Veronica felt that warm flutter in her chest again. I'd like that. I'll pick you up at 7, Brandon said. Then he hesitated. Actually, is that okay? I don't want to assume or push. If you'd rather meet somewhere. You can pick me up, Veronica said with a smile. I trust you, Brandon. The look he gave her was so full of gratitude and wonder that it took her breath away. You don't know what it means to hear that. As they left the coffee shop together, Brandon walking her to his waiting car so it could take her back to work, they nearly collided with a woman pushing a stroller. Brandon stepped back quickly, apologizing, but the woman's eyes widened in recognition. Veronica? Is that you? Veronica looked closer and gasped. Rosa? It was Tommy's mother, looking much better than she had yesterday at the construction site. She was neatly dressed, her dark hair pulled back, and her face was bright with surprise and joy. In the stroller, Tommy sat bundled in a warm jacket, a bandage on his forehead but otherwise looking healthy and happy. I can't believe I'm seeing you, Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion. I've been trying to find you. The police took your information, but I wanted to thank you properly. You saved my baby's life. Veronica knelt down beside the stroller, smiling at Tommy. Hey there, little man. How are you feeling? Good, Tommy said shyly. Mama says you're a hero. Your mama is very smart, Veronica said, ruffling his hair gently. But you're the brave one. You held on until help came. Rosa was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to thank you. You risked your life for my son. I can never repay that. You don't need to repay anything, Veronica said firmly, standing and taking Rosa's hands. I'm just grateful I was there. That Tommy is okay. That's all the thanks I need. Brandon had been standing quietly to the side, but now he stepped forward. Mrs. Rodriguez? My name is Brandon Mitchell. I'm a friend of Veronica's. Rosa looked at him, clearly uncertain. Brandon pulled out a business card and handed it to her. I'm starting a foundation to help families in this neighborhood. We're going to build a community center, provide services, create opportunities. Veronica is going to help me run it. Rosa looked at the card, then at Brandon, then at Veronica. You're doing this because of Tommy? We're doing this because people like you deserve support, Brandon said gently. Because families shouldn't have to struggle alone. Because your neighborhood has potential that just needs resources to flourish. But I want you to know, Veronica added, that you and Tommy can be part of it if you want. We're going to need input from families who live here, who understand what the community needs. Your voice matters. Rosa pressed the business card to her chest, fresh tears falling. My whole life, people have told me what I need. No one has ever asked me what I want. No one has ever said my voice matters. Well, it does, Brandon said firmly. It absolutely does. They talked for a few more minutes, exchanging contact information and promising to stay in touch. When Rosa finally continued on her way, pushing Tommy's stroller down the sidewalk, she kept turning back to wave, her face glowing with hope. That was beautiful, Brandon said softly, watching them go. That's what we're building, Veronica replied. That hope. That sense of being seen and valued. Brandon took her hand, right there on the public sidewalk, and squeezed it gently. We're going to change lives, Veronica. Starting with hers. That evening, Brandon picked Veronica up at her apartment building in a regular car, not a limousine. He dressed down slightly, wearing dark pants and a green button-down shirt instead of a full suit. He looked handsome and approachable, and Veronica's heart skipped when she opened the door to find him standing there with a small bouquet of flowers. These are for you, he said, offering the bouquet. Nothing too fancy. I remember you said you prefer simple things. The flowers were perfect, bright sunflowers and purple irises, cheerful and uncomplicated. They're beautiful. Let me put them in water. Brandon waited in her small living room while she arranged the flowers in a vase. She could see him looking around, taking in her modest apartment with its second-hand furniture and walls covered in photos and children's drawings from families she'd helped. I like your place, he called out. It feels like a home. It's small, Veronica said, returning with the vase and setting it on her coffee table. But it's mine. Size doesn't matter, Brandon said. You've made it warm. Personal. My penthouse is 10 times bigger and feels empty in comparison. They drove to a restaurant Brandon knew, a family-owned Italian place in a neighborhood similar to where Rosa lived. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but the food was incredible and the atmosphere was warm. The owner greeted Brandon by name, clearly surprised and delighted to see him. "Mr. Mitchell, what a pleasure," the older man said, his Italian accent thick and genuine. "And you brought a beautiful lady. Come, I have the perfect table for you." They were seated in a quiet corner, and soon the table was filled with dishes the owner insisted they must try. Homemade pasta, fresh bread, perfectly seasoned vegetables, and wine that tasted like summer sunshine. "You come here often?" Veronica asked. "My father used to bring me here when I was a kid," Brandon explained. "When we had a little money for treats. Mr. Rossi, the owner, always remembered us. Even when we couldn't afford to eat here anymore, he'd save leftovers for us, call it helping test recipes. He kept our pride intact while making sure we ate." "That's beautiful. He's a good man. Built this place from nothing, raised his family here, never forgot where he came from." Brandon smiled. "When I made my first million, this was the first place I came to celebrate. I tried to pay Mr. Rossi back for all those recipe tests, but he wouldn't take the money. Said helping us was an investment that had clearly paid off." Veronica reached across the table and took Brandon's hand. "You have good people in your life." "I'm learning to recognize them better," Brandon said, looking at her meaningfully. "For a long time I surrounded myself with people who only cared about what I could do for them. Now I'm trying to find people who care about who I am." "Who are you, Brandon?" Veronica asked softly. "Really?" Brandon was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I'm someone who lost his way and is trying to find it again. I'm someone who has a lot but doesn't always know what to do with it. I'm someone who wants to matter, not because of my bank account but because of what I do with it. I'm someone who met a woman covered in mud and realized she was exactly what I'd been searching for." Veronica felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm just me, Brandon. I'm not special." "You're wrong," he said firmly. "You're the most special person I've met. You're brave and kind and selfless. You make me want to be better. You make me remember why any of this matters." They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the conversation. Veronica told Brandon more about her life. Growing up with a single mother who worked as a nurse, learning early that life was hard for many people through no fault of their own, deciding in high school that she wanted to help families like hers. Brandon shared more of his own story, the years of poverty, watching his parents struggle, the determination that drove him to succeed, and the loneliness that came with that success. He talked about failed relationships with women who saw him as a trophy, friendships that fell apart when people realized he wouldn't give them money, and the isolation of being wealthy in a world where most people couldn't relate to his experiences. "I thought money would solve everything," he admitted. "I thought once I had enough I'd be happy. But money just magnifies what's already there. If you're lonely, more money makes you more lonely. If you're lost, more money just means you're lost with better stuff." "But money can also magnify good things," Veronica pointed out. "If you're generous, more money means you can help more people. If you're kind, more money gives you more ways to show kindness. You just have to choose what you want to magnify." Brandon smiled at her. "See? This is what I mean. You make everything clearer, simpler. You cut through all the confusion and get to what matters." "I've had a lot of practice cutting through bureaucracy and confusion in my work," Veronica said with a laugh. "It's kind of my job." As dessert arrived, a perfect tiramisu that Mr. Rossi insisted was on the house for the lovely couple, Brandon brought up the foundation again. "I've been thinking about timing," he said. "How quickly can we actually get this started? I don't want to rush and do it wrong, but I also don't want families to wait longer than necessary for help. We need to balance speed with care," Veronica said thoughtfully. "Maybe we could start with something small and immediate while we plan the bigger projects. Like an emergency assistance fund that families can access right away for things like rent help, medical bills, car repairs. The kind of immediate crises that can spiral if not addressed quickly." Brandon's face lit up. "Yes, we could set that up within days. Just need a bank account, clear criteria for assistance, and someone to process applications. You could handle that part." "I could," Veronica agreed. "And it would let us start helping people immediately while we work on the community center and longer-term programs." "How much should we fund it with to start?" Brandon asked, pulling out his phone to make notes. Veronica did quick math in her head based on the families she worked with. $200,000 would help a lot of families for several months while we build the infrastructure for sustainable support. "Let's make it $1 million, Brandon said casually. "Give us room to help more people and test what works." Veronica nearly choked on her wine. $1 million? Brandon, that's less than I spent on my car, Brandon said firmly. And this will actually make a difference. Don't think about it as a huge amount. Think about it as what it can do. How many families can stay in their homes? How many kids can see a doctor? How many parents can fix their car so they can get to work? That's what $1 million means. Not the number but the lives it changes. Veronica felt overwhelmed by his generosity. You're really serious about this? I've never been more serious about anything, Brandon promised. Tomorrow I'll have my lawyers draw up the foundation paperwork. We'll make it official. The Hope and Kindness Foundation. How does that sound? Hope and kindness, Veronica repeated softly. It's perfect. That's what you showed me, Brandon said. Hope that things can be better and the kindness to make it happen. That's what I want this foundation to represent. They talked until the restaurant began to close, Mr. Rossi finally gently suggesting they might want to continue their conversation elsewhere as his staff needed to clean. Brandon apologized profusely and left a tip that made the older man's eyes widen, despite his protests. You are too generous, Mr. Rossi said, trying to return some of the money. You were generous to my family when we had nothing, Brandon replied, gently pushing the money back. This doesn't even begin to repay that. Thank you, Mr. Rossi, for everything. Then and now. The older man had tears in his eyes as he hugged Brandon tightly. Your father would be so proud of the man you've become. So proud. On the drive back to Veronica's apartment, they held hands across the center console, comfortable silence filling the car. When Brandon walked her to her door, Veronica felt nervous for the first time all evening. Thank you for dinner, she said. For everything. These past 2 days have been incredible. Thank you for giving me a chance, Brandon replied. For seeing past the money and the title to who I actually am. For showing me what really matters. They stood in the hallway, neither quite ready to say goodnight. Finally, Brandon leaned forward and kissed her cheek, soft and gentle. Good night, Veronica. I'll call you tomorrow about the foundation paperwork. Good night, Brandon. She watched him walk down the hallway to the elevator, and he turned back to wave before the doors closed. Veronica entered her apartment, touching her cheek where he'd kissed her, feeling like she was floating. Her phone buzzed with a text from Regina. Girl. You better call me right now. Veronica laughed and called her friend, spending the next hour recounting everything that had happened. Regina listened with increasingly excited interruptions, her delight obvious even through the phone. I knew you two would be perfect together, Regina said triumphantly. I just knew it. It's only been 2 days, Veronica cautioned, though she couldn't stop smiling. 2 days in which you saved a life, started a foundation, and made the loneliest billionaire I know smile again, Regina countered. I'd say that's a pretty good start. As Veronica finally ended the call and got ready for bed, she couldn't argue with that logic. It was a pretty good start indeed. Are you following along? What do you think Veronica and Brandon should focus on first with their foundation? Let me know in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter where their plans really start taking shape. Asterisk asterisk. The conference room at Mitchell Industries was nothing like the spaces Veronica was used to. The table was polished wood that probably cost more than her car, the chairs were leather that whispered comfort, and the view from the windows showed the entire city spread out below. She felt out of place in her simple red dress and modest jewelry, but Brandon's warm smile when she entered made those worries fade. Veronica, thank you for coming, he said, standing to greet her. I want you to meet some people who are going to help us make this happen. 4 other people were in the room. 2 lawyers, a financial advisor, and a woman Brandon introduced as Sarah Chin, who ran his company's charitable giving program. Sarah has experience setting up foundations and navigating nonprofit regulations, Brandon explained. She's going to help us structure this properly so we can start helping families as quickly as possible. They spent the morning going through the legal and financial framework needed to establish the Hope and Kindness Foundation. Veronica listened carefully, asking questions when the legal language became too complex. She was impressed by how thorough Brandon's team was, how they anticipated problems before they arose and built solutions into the structure. The Emergency Assistance Fund can be operational within a week, Sarah explained, pointing to documents on her tablet. We'll need clear criteria for who qualifies and what kind of assistance we can provide. Veronica, you'll be the program director, which means you'll have final say on approvals. Me? Veronica said, surprised. Shouldn't there be a committee or review process? You're the expert, Brandon said firmly. You know what families need better than any committee. I trust your judgment completely. The lawyers outlined the legal protections needed, the tax implications and the reporting requirements. The financial advisor discussed investment strategies to ensure the foundation's endowment would grow over time, providing sustainable funding for years to come. Mr. Mitchell wants to seed the foundation with $10 million initially, the financial advisor said casually. Veronica's head snapped up. $10 million? Brandon, yesterday you said $1 million for the emergency fund. That's still the plan for the emergency fund, Brandon confirmed. But I've been thinking bigger. We need capital for the community center, staff salaries, program development, and a reserve fund for sustainability. $10 million gives us room to grow without constantly fundraising in the early years. That's an enormous amount of money, Veronica said, feeling overwhelmed. It's an investment in a community, Brandon corrected. In families. In the future. It's exactly what I should be doing with my resources. Sarah pulled up architectural drawings on the large screen at the end of the room. I took the liberty of identifying 3 potential properties for the community center. All are in or near the neighborhood where Mrs. Rodriguez lives. Each has good bones, potential for renovation, and enough space for the programs you discussed. Veronica leaned forward, studying the buildings. One was an old library, another a former school, and the third had been a community recreation center that closed due to funding cuts. They all had character, history, and presence in the neighborhood. The recreation center makes the most sense, she said thoughtfully. People in the community already know it, have memories there. Reopening it would feel like reclaiming something that was lost rather than imposing something new. I agree, Brandon said. Plus it already has the infrastructure for the kinds of programs we want to offer. Basketball courts, classroom space, a kitchen for cooking classes and food distribution. The building needs significant renovation, Sarah warned. New roof, updated electrical, accessibility improvements. We're talking a couple $1 million in renovation costs. Do it, Brandon said without hesitation. Do it right. Make it beautiful and functional. I want families to walk in and feel welcomed, valued. Not like they're getting charity but like they're coming to a place that was built with care and respect. The lawyers made notes, Sarah added tasks to her project list, and Veronica felt excitement building in her chest. This was really happening. They were really going to build something meaningful. One more thing, Brandon said, pulling up a different document. Staffing. Veronica, I want you to be the executive director of the foundation. Brandon, I have a job, Veronica protested. I can't just leave my current families. What if I told you that the foundation would hire additional social workers to take over your current caseload, ensuring your families continue to receive the same quality care? Brandon said. What if I told you that as executive director, you'd be paid twice what you make now with better benefits and the resources to actually help families instead of just managing their crisis? Veronica's breath caught. You've thought of everything. I've thought about what would make you say yes, Brandon admitted. Because I need you in this role, Veronica. Not just for your expertise, though that's invaluable, but because you understand these families on a level I never could. You've lived their struggles. You know what they need, not theoretically but practically. You care about them as people, not statistics. That's what this foundation needs at its core. The financial advisor slid a document across the table. This is the proposed compensation package, Ms. Hayes. Please review it and let us know if you have questions. Veronica picked up the document, her hands trembling slightly. The salary was more than double her current pay. The health insurance was comprehensive. There was retirement matching, paid time off, continuing education funds, and even a stipend for professional development. This is too much, she whispered. It's market rate for an executive director of a foundation this size, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Actually, it's slightly below market rate, but Brandon wanted to ensure most of our funding goes directly to programs rather than administration. You deserve this, Brandon said softly, his gray eyes holding hers. You deserve to be compensated fairly for the work you do. You deserve to not worry about paying your own bills while you help other people pay theirs. You deserve resources and support and recognition. Please say yes. Veronica looked around the table at the faces watching her expectantly. These successful, professional people were waiting for her answer, ready to help her build something extraordinary. All she had to do was say yes. Okay, she said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I'll be the executive director. Let's do this. The room erupted in smiles and congratulations. Sarah immediately began outlining next steps. The lawyers discussed contract details, and the financial advisor talked about setting up accounts. But all Veronica could focus on was Brandon's face, the joy and pride shining in his expression. When the meeting finally ended and the others filed out, chatting about timelines and logistics, Brandon stayed behind with Veronica. "Thank you," he said simply, "for trusting me, for believing in this." "Thank you for making it possible," Veronica replied. "For seeing the value in helping people who can't offer you anything in return." "They're offering me something incredibly valuable," Brandon corrected. "Purpose. Meaning. A reason to wake up every morning that goes beyond profit margins and stock prices. They're offering me the chance to matter." They stood by the windows looking out at the city below. Somewhere down there, Rosa was taking care of Tommy. Somewhere, families were struggling, hoping for help that was about to arrive. Somewhere, the future they were building was already beginning to take shape. "When do we start?" Veronica asked. "Today," Brandon said with a grin. "Sarah's already drafting press releases about the foundation. I want to announce it publicly next week, let the community know help is coming. But we can start processing emergency assistance applications immediately if you're ready." "I'm ready," Veronica confirmed. "I have at least a dozen families off the top of my head who need immediate help. Can we process those first?" "Absolutely. Make a list, provide the details, and we'll get checks out by tomorrow." Veronica felt tears threatening. "Tomorrow?" "Brandon, it usually takes weeks to get emergency assistance through official channels, if families qualify at all. You're saying we can help them tomorrow?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. No red tape. No bureaucracy. Just help when people need it most." They spent the rest of the afternoon in Brandon's office, Veronica outlining the cases she knew needed urgent assistance and Brandon making notes and calls to ensure the help would arrive quickly. There was Mrs. Parker, whose electricity had been shut off and who was trying to keep her diabetic son's insulin cold with ice from gas stations. There was Mr. Thompson, who needed car repairs to get to his new job but couldn't afford them. There was the Nguyen family, facing eviction because medical bills had drained their savings. For each case, Brandon asked questions. How much do they need? What would solve the immediate crisis? What additional support might help prevent future crises? By evening, they had processed 12 emergency assistance applications. 12 families would wake up tomorrow with their immediate crisis solved, with breathing room to plan for the future rather than just survive the present. "I can't believe we just did that in one afternoon," Veronica said, exhausted but exhilarated. "Cases I've been trying to help for weeks, just solved." "That's what resources without bureaucracy can do," Brandon said. "Imagine what we'll accomplish when the community center is open and we have full programs running." They ordered dinner to be delivered to the office, too energized to stop working. While they ate, they refined the criteria for the emergency assistance program, discussed hiring needs, and brainstormed programs for the community center. "We should have a job training program," Veronica suggested. "But not just generic resume writing. Real skills training that leads to actual jobs. Partner with local businesses, create apprenticeships, guarantee interviews for people who complete the training." Brandon typed notes on his laptop. "I can reach out to my business network. A lot of companies are struggling to find reliable employees. If we can train people and vouch for them, it's a win for everyone." "And childcare," Veronica continued, her ideas flowing freely now. "Quality, affordable childcare is the biggest barrier for single parents trying to work or get training. What if the community center had a childcare program with certified teachers? Parents could drop their kids off knowing they're safe and learning, not just being watched." "Yes," Brandon agreed enthusiastically. "What else?" "Healthcare coordination. Help families navigate insurance, find affordable care, schedule appointments. So many people avoid doctors because the system is too complicated and intimidating. Legal aid clinic. Monthly financial literacy workshops. Mental health counseling. Tutoring for kids struggling in school." Brandon's fingers flew over the keyboard, capturing every idea. "A food pantry, but not just canned goods," Veronica added. "Fresh produce, healthy options. Partner with local farms and grocery stores. Teach nutrition and cooking classes." They worked until nearly midnight, building a comprehensive vision of what the Hope and Kindness Foundation could become. Not just a safety net catching people as they fell, but a ladder helping them climb to stability and beyond. Finally, Veronica leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed by what they'd created on paper in just a few days. "This is going to change everything for this community," she said softly. "We're going to change everything," Brandon corrected, reaching across the desk to take her hand. "Together. You bring the heart and expertise, I bring the resources and business connections. Neither of us could do this alone." "Do you really believe that?" Veronica asked. "You have the money. You could hire anyone to run this. But I don't trust anyone else, Brandon said seriously. I trust you. I trust that you'll never lose sight of what matters. That you'll tell me when I'm being stupid or insensitive. That you'll always put the families first. That's worth more than any degree or resume. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands linked across the desk, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. I should get home, Veronica finally said, though she didn't move. We both need sleep if we're going to build a foundation. Let me drive you, Brandon offered. It's late and I don't want you taking the bus at this hour. You don't have to. I want to, Brandon interrupted gently. Please, let me. In the car they talked about smaller things. Favorite books and movies, childhood memories, silly preferences that revealed personality. Veronica learned that Brandon loved old action movies but cried during animated films. That he'd always wanted a dog but never felt he had time for one properly. That his favorite meal was still his mother's meatloaf recipe, which he'd tried and failed to recreate dozens of times. She shared that she collected vintage teacups from thrift stores, that she sang loudly and terribly in the shower, and that she had a weakness for cheesy romance novels despite their predictable plots. I like learning these things about you, Brandon said as they pulled up to her apartment building. The real you beyond the professional competence and the hero who saves children. I'm not a hero, Veronica protested. You are to Tommy Rodriguez. You are to the 12 families we helped today. You are to me, Brandon said quietly. You showed me it's possible to use wealth for good. That's heroic, Veronica. Showing someone a better way to live. He walked her to her door again, the routine already feeling natural and right. This time, when he leaned in to kiss her cheek, Veronica turned her head slightly so their lips met instead. It was brief, gentle, perfect. Good night, Brandon, she whispered. Good night, Veronica. Sweet dreams of community centers and changed lives. She laughed softly. Sweet dreams of grilled cheese sandwiches and billionaires who actually care. Inside her apartment, Veronica changed into comfortable clothes and made herself tea. She sat on her couch, looking at the sunflowers and irises Brandon had given her, still fresh and bright in their vase. Her phone buzzed with a text. Thank you for saying yes. To the foundation. To dinner. To everything. You're making me believe in hope again. Veronica smiled and typed back. Thank you for seeing the person covered in mud and deciding she was worth knowing. You're making me believe in miracles. She fell asleep that night with dreams of community centers full of laughter, families celebrating stability, and a handsome billionaire who made grilled cheese sandwiches and believed in kindness. The foundation was officially born that day, but something else was born too. Something fragile and precious between two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way. Something that promised to grow into something beautiful if they nurtured it with the same care they were bringing to their work. Hope and kindness indeed. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity, meetings, planning sessions, and constant forward momentum. Veronica gave notice at her current job, working with her colleagues to ensure smooth transitions for her families. True to his word, Brandon hired 2 additional social workers to absorb her caseload, both excellent professionals who came with strong references and genuine compassion for the work. I feel guilty leaving, Veronica admitted to Donna on her last day at the agency. Don't, Donna said firmly, hugging her tight. You're not leaving social work. You're expanding it. Everything you'll do with the foundation will help more people than you ever could, working one case at a time here. We're proud of you. The Hope and Kindness Foundation offices were set up in a renovated space near the future community center. Nothing fancy but comfortable and welcoming. Veronica had a real office with a door and windows, a luxury she'd never experienced before. Brandon had furnished it thoughtfully, a comfortable desk chair that supported her back properly, good lighting, and a wall she could dedicate to photos of the families they'd help. Sarah Chun became an invaluable partner, handling the administrative and legal complexities while Veronica focused on program development and community outreach. Together, they hired a small but dedicated staff, 3 program coordinators, 2 administrative assistants, and a facilities manager to oversee the community center renovation. The renovation itself was proceeding faster than expected. Brandon had hired the best contractors, paid them well, and given them clear timelines. When problems arose, they were solved quickly with resources rather than cut corners. Veronica visited the site weekly, watching the old recreation center transform before her eyes. The roof was replaced first, stopping the leaks that had plagued the building. Then came new windows, updated electrical and plumbing, fresh paint in cheerful colors. The gymnasium floor was refinished until it gleamed. The classrooms were modernized with new technology and flexible furniture. The kitchen was equipped with commercial-grade appliances for the cooking classes and food programs Veronica had planned. "It's beautiful," she breathed during one site visit, standing in what would become the main community room. Light poured through the new windows, illuminating walls painted a warm yellow. "It feels hopeful." Brandon stood beside her, an arm around her waist. They'd grown comfortable with casual affection, their relationship deepening naturally alongside their work. They hadn't defined what they were yet. Boyfriend and girlfriend seemed too simple, partners felt too clinical, but they were definitely something. "The contractor says we'll be ready to open in 3 weeks, Brandon said. Just in time for the gala. The gala had been Sarah's idea. A fundraising and awareness event to celebrate the foundation's launch, introduce it to Brandon's wealthy friends and business associates, and hopefully generate additional donations to supplement Brandon's initial funding. Veronica had been nervous about it at first, uncomfortable with the idea of a fancy party while families struggled. But Sarah had convinced her it was necessary. "Rich people like to support causes when they're made to feel part of something meaningful," Sarah had explained. "Give them a compelling story, show them real impact, and they'll write checks. That money helps more families. Don't let your discomfort with wealth get in the way of helping people." So Veronica had agreed, though she'd insisted the event be held at the nearly completed community center rather than some expensive hotel ballroom. She wanted donors to see exactly where their money would go. In the meantime, the emergency assistance program was making a real difference. In 3 weeks, they'd helped 47 families with immediate crises. Mrs. Parker's electricity was restored, and they'd also helped her navigate assistance programs to ensure it wouldn't be shut off again. Mr. Thompson got his car fixed and a gas card to cover his commute for the first 3 months of his new job. The Nguyen family's eviction was stopped, and they were connected with budgeting assistance to manage their medical debt. Each success story filled Veronica with joy, but also with a bittersweet awareness of how many more families still needed help. The emergency assistance was just a bandage. The real healing would come from the comprehensive programs they were building. Veronica made it a priority to stay connected with the families they helped, including Rosa and Tommy Rodriguez. She visited them twice during those busy weeks, bringing toys for Tommy and spending time just talking with Rosa about the neighborhood and what families needed. "People are excited about the community center reopening," Rosa told her during one visit. "But they're also scared. Scared it won't really be for them. That it'll be too expensive or too complicated or they won't be welcome." "That's helpful feedback," Veronica said, making notes. "What would make people feel truly welcome?" "Familiar faces," Rosa said immediately. "Hire people from the neighborhood. Not all outside professionals who don't understand us. If we see our neighbors working there, we'll know it's really for us." Veronica took that advice to heart. When she and Sarah began serious hiring for community center staff, they prioritized local candidates. They hired Rosa herself as a community outreach coordinator, recognizing her natural leadership and her deep roots in the neighborhood. They recruited parents from the community for childcare positions, teachers from the local schools for tutoring programs, and residents who knew everyone for front desk and administrative roles. "This is exactly right," Brandon said when Veronica explained the hiring strategy. "We're not bringing services to the community. We're empowering the community to serve itself." Through it all, Veronica and Brandon's relationship continued to grow. They had working dinners several times a week, planning sessions that often stretched late into the evening. But they also carved out time for non-foundation activities. Brandon took Veronica to a baseball game, where she taught him to actually enjoy the sport he'd only ever watched from expensive box seats. She introduced him to her favorite taco truck, where the food cost less than $5 and tasted better than most fancy restaurants. He showed her his favorite bookstore, a dusty independent shop where he'd spent hours as a teenager escaping his stressful home life. She took him to the community theater where she volunteered occasionally, introducing him to a world of art and culture that had nothing to do with expensive galleries and exclusive openings. They were learning each other, fitting together piece by piece like a puzzle, gradually revealing its picture. Brandon learned that Veronica was a morning person who needed coffee before conversation. Veronica discovered that Brandon was a stress baker who made elaborate cakes at midnight when work worried him. He learned she was fiercely independent but secretly craved someone to lean on. She discovered he was generous to a fault but struggled to accept help himself, as if he had to earn his place in people's lives by being useful. They had their first argument 3 weeks into building the foundation. It was about money, predictably. Brandon wanted to buy Veronica a car to replace her old sedan that constantly needed repairs. She'd refused, insisting she didn't need him to solve her problems. "It's not about solving your problems," Brandon had argued. It's about making your life easier. You're driving all over the city for the foundation. Why not do it in a reliable vehicle? Because I don't need you to buy me things, Veronica had replied, her voice sharp. I'm not with you for your money, Brandon. I need you to understand that. If I let you buy me a car, what's next? An apartment? Clothes? Where does it stop? It stops wherever you want it to stop, Brandon had said, frustrated. I'm not trying to control you or buy your affection. I just hate seeing you stuck on the side of the road with car trouble when I could easily prevent it. They talked it through, both of them working to understand the other's perspective. Veronica helped Brandon see that his desire to help sometimes felt like he was implying she couldn't handle things herself. Brandon helped Veronica understand that accepting help wasn't the same as being dependent or mercenary. They'd compromised. No new car, but Brandon's mechanic would do a thorough inspection and necessary repairs on her current vehicle, with the foundation covering the cost as a business expense since she used it for work. We're going to have more disagreements, Brandon had said after they'd resolved the argument. We come from such different worlds. Good, Veronica had replied. Disagreements mean we're being honest with each other. I don't want a relationship where I pretend to agree with everything you say just because you're wealthy and I'm not. I don't want that either, Brandon had assured her. I want you to call me out when I'm being stupid or insensitive. I need that. The argument had actually strengthened their relationship, proving they could work through conflict with respect and honesty. As the gala approached, preparations intensified. Caterers were hired, decorations planned, invitations sent. Brandon's assistant reported that over 200 people had RSVP'd, including some very wealthy and influential individuals. The potential for fundraising was significant. Veronica worked with Sarah to prepare materials for the event, a professional video showcasing the community and the need, printed materials explaining the foundation's programs, and displays featuring some of the families they'd already helped, with their permission. We're going to have Rosa speak, Veronica decided. She's articulate, she's genuine, and her story about Tommy will move people. Real impact is more powerful than any statistics I could share. Sarah agreed, and Rosa accepted the invitation eagerly, though nervously. Veronica helped her prepare, coaching her to just speak from the heart about what the foundation meant to her family and community. Brandon was also preparing his own remarks, practicing them with Veronica late one evening in his penthouse. He wanted to strike the right tone, grateful for people's attendance, compelling about the need, inspiring about the possibility, but not preachy or condescending. Just tell them why you're doing this, Veronica advised. Tell them about your parents, about Mr. Rossi's restaurant, about finding me covered in mud. People respond to authenticity, Brandon. They can tell when someone really cares versus when they're just checking a charity box. What if I cry? Brandon asked, only half joking. When I talk about my parents, I get emotional. Then cry, Veronica said firmly. Let them see that this matters to you personally. That's what makes it real. The night before the gala, Veronica and Brandon did a final walkthrough of the community center. The contractors had finished just in time. The building gleamed, fresh and inviting. The gymnasium had been set up for the event with round tables, a stage and elegant but not ostentatious decorations. The rest of the building was ready to showcase. Classrooms set up for various programs, the childcare area bright with colorful furniture, the kitchen ready for cooking demonstrations, the job training center equipped with computers and resources. We did this, Brandon said softly, standing in the main lobby with Veronica. In just a few weeks, we took an idea and made it real. We haven't done anything yet, Veronica corrected gently. This is just the beginning. The real work starts when we open the doors and families start coming through them. Then I can't wait to start the real work, Brandon said, pulling her close. Because if it's anything like these past few weeks, it's going to be amazing. They stood there together, imagining the future these walls would hold. Children laughing in the childcare area. Parents learning new skills in classrooms. Families sharing meals cooked in the community kitchen. Teenagers playing basketball in the gymnasium. People helping people, lifting each other up, building a stronger community together. Thank you, Veronica whispered, resting her head on Brandon's shoulder. For making this possible. For believing in it. For believing in me. Thank you for showing me what was possible, Brandon replied, kissing the top of her head. For saving Tommy. For showing up covered in mud. For saying yes to all of this. You changed my life, Veronica. You made me remember who I wanted to be. The next evening, as Veronica prepared for the gala, she felt nervous energy humming through her body. This was it. The official launch of everything they'd been building. The moment when their private partnership became a public commitment to change. She'd bought a new dress for the occasion, a floor-length gown in deep red that made her dark skin glow. It was the most expensive thing she'd ever bought for herself, and she'd hesitated for days before purchasing it. But Brandon's eyes when he picked her up made it worth every penny. "You look stunning," he breathed, offering his arm. "Absolutely stunning." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, taking in his tailored tuxedo. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, sophisticated and handsome. They drove to the community center together, Veronica's hand clasped in Brandon's. She could feel his nervous energy matching her own. "Ready to change the world?" she asked. "With you," Brandon replied, squeezing her hand. "Always." The gala was about to begin, and with it, the real work of the Hope and Kindness Foundation. But Veronica felt ready. She had the resources, the team, the plan, and most importantly, she had a partner who truly understood what they were building and why it mattered. Hope and Kindness were about to flood a community that had been waiting for exactly this. And it was going to be beautiful. The community center glowed with warm light as guests began arriving for the gala. Veronica stood near the entrance with Brandon and Sarah, greeting people as they entered. The contrast was striking. Wealthy attendees in designer clothes stepping into a building that existed to serve struggling families. But the building itself seemed to bridge that gap, welcoming everyone with its fresh paint and hopeful atmosphere. "Veronica, Brandon, congratulations on this incredible space," said a woman in a sparkling blue dress, one of Brandon's business associates. "I had no idea this neighborhood had such potential." "Every neighborhood has potential," Veronica replied warmly. "It just needs investment and belief. Thank you for coming tonight." As the room filled with guests, Veronica noticed Rosa arriving with Tommy and her husband, Miguel, whom Veronica hadn't met before. They looked nervous, dressed in their best clothes but clearly uncomfortable among so much wealth. Veronica immediately went to them. "Rosa, you look beautiful," she said, hugging her friend. "And Tommy, look at you in that suit. Very handsome." Tommy grinned shyly, staying close to his mother. Miguel shook Veronica's hand firmly. "Thank you for inviting us. For all of this. We never imagined something like this could happen here." "This is your community center," Veronica said firmly. "You belong here as much as anyone. More actually because you live here. These wealthy people are just visitors. You're home." The reassurance seemed to help. Rosa's shoulders relaxed slightly, and Miguel looked around the space with growing pride rather than intimidation. Brandon approached their group, greeting the Rodriguez family warmly. "Rosa, Miguel, Tommy. I'm so glad you're here. Rosa, are you ready for your speech?" "I'm terrified," Rosa admitted. "But I'll do it. For the community. For everyone who needs to know help is really coming." The evening's program began after dinner. Brandon took the stage first, looking confident but genuine. Veronica watched from the front table, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Brandon began. "A few weeks ago, I was a lonely billionaire who'd forgotten why any of it mattered. I had money, success, everything society says should make you happy. But I was empty inside, going through motions, living a life that felt meaningless despite all its comfort." The room was silent, people leaning forward to hear. "Then I went on a blind date. The woman who showed up was covered head to toe in mud. Her dress was ruined. Her hair was a mess. She looked like she'd lost a fight with a swamp. My first instinct was to leave, to write off the evening as a disaster." Soft laughter rippled through the audience. "But I didn't leave. I stayed to hear her story. And what she told me changed my life." Brandon's voice grew thick with emotion. "She'd been on her way to meet me when she heard a child screaming. A 6-year-old boy had fallen into a muddy drainage ditch and was drowning. This woman, who had everything to lose by being late to our date, didn't hesitate. She kicked off her heels and climbed into that ditch. She saved that little boy's life." Brandon paused, looking directly at Veronica. "Then she showed up to our date anyway, covered in mud, because she didn't want to make me feel forgotten. That's the woman sitting right there. Veronica Hayes, the bravest person I've ever met." Heads turned toward Veronica, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. But Brandon wasn't done. "That little boy she saved is here tonight too. Tommy Rodriguez, can you stand up?" Tommy stood hesitantly, his mother's hand on his shoulder for support. The audience applauded, and the boy's face broke into a surprised smile. "Tommy's mother, Rosa, is going to speak to you in a moment," Brandon continued. "But first I want to tell you about my parents. My father was a mechanic. My mother cleaned houses. We were poor, struggling, one crisis away from disaster at all times. When my dad got sick, when cancer destroyed us financially, no one helped. No one stepped in. No foundation existed to support families like mine. His voice cracked slightly, and Veronica saw him take a steadying breath. My father died. My mother broke under the weight of grief and debt. I built my business empire because I never wanted to feel that helpless again. But somewhere along the way I forgot the point. I forgot that the goal wasn't just to escape poverty but to help others escape it too. Veronica reminded me. Her courage, her compassion, her willingness to literally get muddy to help someone in need, that showed me what I should be doing with my wealth and privilege. So we created the Hope and Kindness Foundation. Not to give handouts but to build ladders. Not to rescue people but to empower them to rescue themselves. The audience was completely engaged now, the usual wealthy event chatter replaced by genuine attention. Everything you see tonight, this building, these programs, this investment in a community, started with one woman's choice to help a drowning child. Started with kindness. Started with hope. And I'm asking you tonight to be part of that hope. To invest in this community, in these families, in the belief that everyone deserves a chance to build a stable, dignified life. Brandon stepped back from the microphone to strong applause. Then Rosa took the stage, clutching her prepared notes with shaking hands. Veronica gave her an encouraging nod. Hello. My name is Rosa Rodriguez, she began, her accent thick but her voice clear. 3 weeks ago my son Tommy almost died. He fell in a ditch full of muddy water while playing. I watched him drowning and I couldn't reach him. I've never felt so helpless, so terrified. She paused, tears in her eyes. Then this woman, a stranger, climbed down into that ditch. She risked her life to save my baby. When she brought him up, when I held my Tommy again, I knew I had witnessed something holy. Not because she was special, but because she chose kindness over convenience. She chose my son's life over her own comfort. Rosa looked at Veronica. That woman is now my friend. And she's building something here that will save many more lives, not from drowning in water but from drowning in poverty and struggle. I know what it's like to live in this neighborhood, Rosa continued, her confidence growing. To work 2 jobs and still not have enough for rent. To choose between medicine for your children and food on the table. To feel invisible, like no one sees you struggling, like no one cares if you make it or not. The room was completely silent now, the wealthy guests confronted with a reality most had never experienced. This foundation, this community center, it says we matter. That our families deserve help. That kindness exists even for people who can't pay it back. Rosa's voice broke. You wealthy people, you'll never know what that means. To feel like someone finally sees you. To have hope when you've been hopeless for so long. She folded her notes, speaking from her heart now. I'm asking you to help. Not for me, though my family needs it, but for all the families who live here. For the single mothers, the struggling fathers, the children who deserve better. Give to this foundation. Support what they're building. Because what they're building is more than programs and services. They're building hope. They're building dignity. They're building community. Rosa stepped back from the microphone, and the applause was thunderous. People stood, some with tears in their eyes, moved by her raw honesty and emotion. Veronica saw checkbooks coming out, phones being pulled out to make immediate donations. The rest of the evening was a blur. Sarah reported that they'd raised over $3 million in pledges that night alone. Donors toured the building, asking questions about programs, meeting staff members, some even exchanging contact information with Rosa to learn more about the community's needs. But the moment that stuck with Veronica happened near the end of the night. An older woman approached her, elegant in her silver dress and pearls. Ms. Hayes, my name is Patricia Blackwell. I'm on the board of several charitable foundations in the city. Veronica shook her hand, wondering what criticism was coming. She'd been bracing for it all night, wealthy people telling her how to run programs, questioning whether the poor deserved help, suggesting that bootstraps were the real answer. But Patricia surprised her. I want to tell you about my granddaughter, Emily. She's 16, privileged, has never wanted for anything. She's also selfish, entitled, and completely disconnected from the real world. Veronica wasn't sure how to respond, so she stayed quiet. I want to know if you have volunteer opportunities for teenagers, Patricia continued. Real work, not just photo opportunities or resume padding. I want Emily to spend her summer here, learning what real struggle looks like, seeing what people like Mrs. Rodriguez deal with every day. I want her to develop empathy. Would you be willing to have her? Veronica felt her opinion of Patricia shift entirely. We absolutely have volunteer opportunities, and I think that would be good for Emily. But I need you to understand, We won't go easy on her because she's wealthy. She'll work hard. She'll see difficult things. She'll be challenged. Good, Patricia said firmly. That's exactly what she needs. Thank you. Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. A tech CEO wanted to fund computer literacy classes. A retired teacher offered to volunteer in the tutoring program. A construction company owner pledged to help with future building projects at cost. The community center was becoming more than just Veronica and Brandon's project. It was becoming a movement. Brandon found Veronica late in the evening, after most guests had left. She was standing in what would be the childcare area, imagining it full of children's laughter. $3 million, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Plus volunteer commitments, in-kind donations and ongoing pledge promises. We did it, Veronica. We launched this thing properly. Rosa did it, Veronica corrected. Her honesty, her story, that's what moved people. Your idea to have her speak, Brandon reminded her. Your instinct that authenticity matters more than polish. You were right. They stood together in comfortable silence, exhausted but triumphant. The gala had been a success beyond their hopes. The foundation was real, funded, supported by a community of donors who seemed genuinely committed to helping. Can I tell you something? Brandon said quietly. Always. I'm falling in love with you, he confessed. Actually, I think I already have. Completely. Irrevocably. In love with who you are, what you stand for, how you make me better. I know it's fast, I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I can't deny what I feel. Veronica turned in his arms to face him, her heart racing. I love you too, she whispered. I think I started loving you when you didn't walk away from the mud-covered crazy woman in that restaurant lobby. When you chose to understand instead of judge. When you believed me. Brandon kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. So we're doing this? Brandon asked. Building a foundation and falling in love at the same time? Seems like we already are, Veronica replied. Might as well admit it and enjoy it. They laughed together, the sound echoing through the empty building. Tomorrow the real work would begin. The doors would open, families would start coming through, programs would launch. But tonight, they'd proven that hope and kindness weren't just nice ideas. They were powerful forces that could move hearts and open wallets and change communities. And they'd proven that two people from completely different worlds could find each other, understand each other, and build something beautiful together. Hope, kindness, and now love. The foundation was built on all three. The official opening day of the Hope and Kindness Foundation Community Center arrived on a bright Saturday morning. Veronica woke early, too excited and nervous to sleep. Brandon had stayed at her apartment the night before, both of them too wired from last-minute preparations to want to be alone. Today's the day, he said, pulling her close as they lay in bed watching the sunrise through her window. How do you feel? Terrified and excited in equal measure, Veronica admitted. What if no one comes? What if they come but don't feel welcome? What if we miss something important? Then we'll adjust and do better, Brandon said calmly. This is a journey, not a destination. We're going to make mistakes. What matters is that we're trying and that we're committed to learning. They arrived at the community center 2 hours before the official opening. Staff members were already there, setting up registration tables, arranging welcome materials, doing final checks on all the program spaces. Rosa was in the lobby, directing traffic with natural leadership. Everything looks perfect, she assured Veronica. Stop worrying and trust that we're ready. At 10 o'clock they unlocked the doors. For a terrifying moment, no one appeared. The staff exchanged nervous glances. Then, slowly people began trickling in. Families from the neighborhood, curious and cautious. Single mothers with children. Elderly residents who remembered when the building had been opened before. Teenagers who'd heard about job training programs. By noon, the center was buzzing with activity. The childcare area had 12 children playing and learning, their parents either enrolled in classes or meeting with counselors about emergency assistance. The job training center had 15 people working through computer literacy programs. The food pantry had a steady stream of families selecting groceries. The basketball courts had pickup games going, providing recreation and community. Veronica walked through the building with Brandon, greeting families, answering questions, soaking in the reality of what they'd created. This was real. People were being helped right now because of choices they'd made just weeks ago. Miss Hayes. A young woman approached tentatively. She looked to be in her early 20s, with a toddler on her hip and exhaustion in her eyes. I heard you can help with rent assistance? I'm 2 months behind and my landlord is about to evict us. Come with me, Veronica said warmly, leading her to one of the private consultation rooms. Let's talk about your situation and see what we can do. The next hour was spent reviewing the young woman's circumstances. Her name was Ashley Williams and she'd been working full-time until her childcare fell through. Without reliable care for her daughter Lily, she'd lost her job. Now she was drowning in debt, facing eviction with no clear path forward. How much do you need to avoid eviction? Veronica asked. $2,400, Ashley whispered, as if saying the number aloud made her failure more real. I know it's a lot. If you can't help, I understand. I just thought I'd try. Veronica pulled up the emergency assistance system on her computer. We can cover your back rent. That solves the immediate crisis. But let's also talk about preventing this from happening again. Do you want to go back to work? Ashley's eyes widened. You'll help with the rent? Just like that. Just like that, Veronica confirmed. That's why we exist. Now about work. I loved my job, Ashley said, tears streaming down her face. I was an administrative assistant at a law firm. But I can't work without childcare and I can't afford childcare without work. It's impossible. It's not impossible, Veronica said gently. We have a childcare program here. Certified teachers, quality care, subsidized rates based on income. Lily can come here while you work. Would that help? Ashley was sobbing now, overwhelmed by sudden hope. You can really do this? This isn't a trick? It's not a trick, Veronica promised. It's what we're here for. Let me connect you with our job counselor. She'll help you reach out to your former employer, polish your resume and prepare for interviews. Meanwhile, the rent assistance check will be ready by Monday. And we can enroll Lily in childcare starting next week. Ashley hugged Veronica so tightly it almost hurt. Thank you. Oh God, thank you. I was so scared. I didn't know what I was going to do. You're going to be okay, Veronica said softly. We're going to make sure of it. Similar scenes played out throughout the day. An elderly man who couldn't afford his heart medication was connected with a healthcare advocate who helped him navigate prescription assistance programs. A father struggling to find work after a layoff was enrolled in job training and given professional clothes from the center's donation closet. A teenager who dropped out of high school was directed to GED classes and counseling. Brandon spent the day observing everything, talking with families, learning about their needs directly. Veronica watched him kneel down to talk with children at their eye level, listen intently to elderly residents' concerns, and take notes on suggestions for improvement. This wasn't performative charity for him. He genuinely cared, genuinely wanted to understand. Late in the afternoon, a family arrived that made Veronica's heart clench. A mother, father, and 3 young children, all looking exhausted and scared. The father, James Carter, explained that they'd been living in their car for 2 weeks after losing their apartment to a fire that destroyed everything. The insurance company is fighting the claim, James said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. They say the fire was our fault somehow, which is garbage. We lost everything. Clothes, furniture, my wife's jewelry that was her grandmother's. Everything. His wife, Michelle, added quietly, we've been staying in different parking lots trying to keep the kids safe. They haven't been to school in a week. I don't know what to do anymore. Veronica felt tears threatening but held them back. She needed to be strong to help, not to cry. Okay. Let's break this down into steps. First, immediate needs. Where are you planning to sleep tonight? We thought maybe the shelter, but they're full, James said. We'll probably just find another parking lot. No, Veronica said firmly. You're not sleeping in a car tonight. Give me a few minutes. She stepped out and called Brandon, explained the situation. Within 10 minutes, he'd arranged for the Carter family to stay in a modest hotel for 2 weeks, with the foundation covering all costs. Veronica returned with the news, watching relief and disbelief wash over the parents' faces. We also need to get your kids enrolled in school immediately, Veronica continued. Can you come back Monday morning? I'll have our education coordinator help with that. And we need to connect you with legal aid about the insurance claim. We have lawyers who volunteer here who might be able to help. Why are you doing this for us? Michelle asked, tears streaming down her face. You don't know us. We're nobody. You're not nobody, Veronica said fiercely. You're a family going through a terrible time. You're parents who love your children and are trying to keep them safe. You matter. Your struggle matters. And you deserve help. The Carters left with hotel vouchers, vouchers for the food pantry, and appointments for follow-up services. Their oldest child, a girl about 8 years old, turned back as they reached the door. Are you an angel? She asked Veronica seriously. Veronica smiled through her tears. No, honey. I'm just a person who believes everyone deserves kindness. But thank you for asking. By the time they closed the doors at 6 o'clock, they'd served over 150 families. The staff was exhausted but energized. Success stories and needs filled the debrief meeting. We ran out of food pantry items around 3, Rosa reported. We need to increase our inventory. The childcare area can only accommodate 20 children, and we had inquiries for at least 40 spots, another staff member added. We need to expand. The job training computers were in use constantly, said Marcus Lee, the job training coordinator. We should think about adding an evening shift so people who work during the day can access services. Veronica made notes on everything, her mind already working on solutions and improvements. Brandon listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly letting the staff experts share their insights. After the meeting ended and most staff had left, Veronica and Brandon walked through the now quiet building together. We did it, Veronica said softly. We really did it. Over 100 families helped in one day. And we barely scratched the surface of the need, Brandon added. But it's a start. A real, meaningful start. They stood in the main lobby, where photos from the day were already being displayed on a digital screen. Smiling families, children playing, people hugging staff members. Evidence of hope and kindness in action. I love you, Brandon said suddenly. I know I already told you, but I need to say it again. What we did today, what you made possible by showing up covered in mud and inspiring me to be better. I love you for that. I love you for who you are and what you believe in. Veronica turned to face him, her heart full. I love you too. For seeing past the mud to who I really was. For not walking away. For using everything you have to help people you'll never meet. For being humble enough to learn and change. They kissed in the lobby of the community center they'd built together, surrounded by evidence of what hope and kindness could accomplish. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new families, new needs. But tonight they could celebrate. They could acknowledge that they'd done something meaningful. Later, at Brandon's penthouse, they ordered pizza and collapsed on the couch, too tired to cook. Ashley Williams, Veronica said, thinking about the young mother from that morning. She was so desperate, so scared. And in one conversation we gave her back her future. Her rent is covered, her daughter has childcare, she can go back to work. Just like that, her whole life changed direction. That's the power of resources without bureaucracy, Brandon said. Imagine how many families could be helped if more wealthy people committed to direct, immediate assistance instead of waiting for government programs or making people jump through endless hoops. Some people will take advantage, Veronica warned. We're going to get scammers, people who lie to get help they don't actually need. That's inevitable. I'd rather help 10 people who don't deserve it than miss one person who does, Brandon said firmly. We can build in checks and balances, but I refuse to make the system so difficult that people in genuine need give up. Dignity matters more than perfect efficiency. Veronica snuggled closer to him, grateful for his perspective. You're a good man, Brandon Mitchell. Only because you showed me how to be one, he replied, kissing the top of her head. They fell asleep on the couch, exhausted and happy, dreaming of all the families they'd help tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. The Hope and Kindness Foundation was no longer just a dream or a plan. It was real, operational, changing lives. And this was only the beginning. 3 months after the community center opened, Veronica stood in her office staring at the problem that had just landed on her desk. The property deal for their second community center, the one they'd been planning for the east side of the city, had fallen through. The seller had backed out at the last minute, choosing instead to sell to a developer who wanted to build luxury condos. 3 months of work gone, Sarah said, frustration evident in her voice. We had everything lined up. The architectural plans, the budget, the programs. And now nothing. Veronica sank into her chair, feeling the weight of disappointment. They'd promised families on the east side that help was coming. Now what would she tell them? There was a knock on her office door. Brandon entered, his expression serious. I heard about the property deal. Sarah just told me. I'm sorry, Veronica said. I know we invested a lot of time and money into that plan. Don't apologize, Brandon said firmly, sitting across from her. This isn't your fault. It's a setback, not a failure. We'll find another property. But we promised those families, Veronica said, her voice breaking slightly. We gave them hope, and now we're going to have to tell them to wait even longer. Do you know how that feels? To promise help and then not deliver? Brandon was quiet for a moment, then moved his chair closer to hers. I do know how it feels. When my father was sick and insurance companies kept denying coverage, People promised to help. Social workers, church groups, community organizations. They all said they'd figure something out. Most of them never did. The promises felt worse than nothing because they gave us hope that got crushed over and over. Veronica looked at him, seeing the old pain in his eyes. But here's the difference, Brandon continued. We're not abandoning those families. We're just delayed. We'll find another property, maybe even a better one. And in the meantime, we can offer services through mobile outreach. We can bring programs to their neighborhood while we work on a permanent location. Mobile outreach? Veronica asked, intrigued despite her disappointment. Why not? We could get a bus, outfit it with computers and resources, staff it with counselors and job training specialists. Bring the foundation to the people instead of waiting for them to come to us. Veronica felt the spark of excitement reigniting. That could actually work. It might even reach people who wouldn't come to a traditional center. Exactly. So this setback becomes an opportunity for innovation. Brandon took her hand. This is what partnership means, Veronica. When one of us is discouraged, the other finds the way forward. We're in this together. But the property setback wasn't their only challenge. That afternoon, Brandon had a tense meeting with some of his business associates. Veronica wasn't present, but he told her about it later. They think I'm wasting money, he said bluntly. They said I should invest in profitable ventures, not throwing money at poverty, as Robert phrased it. Veronica felt anger flare. What did you say? I told them the foundation is the best investment I've ever made. That you can't measure returns only in dollars. That the real measure of success is changed lives, not profit margins. Brandon smiled grimly. Robert asked if you brainwashed me. Said I'd changed since meeting you, and not for the better in his opinion. I'm sorry I'm causing problems with your business relationships, Veronica said quietly. Don't be, Brandon said firmly. If my business relationships can't survive me doing meaningful work, they weren't real relationships. Robert is a business associate, not a friend. I'm learning to tell the difference. He pulled out his phone and showed her a spreadsheet. Look at this. Since we opened the center 3 months ago, we've helped over 600 families. We've prevented 43 evictions. We've placed 72 people in jobs. We've provided childcare for 120 children. 20 families have moved from emergency assistance to complete stability. That's success, Veronica. That's what matters. She studied the numbers, feeling pride and renewed determination. You're right. This is what success looks like. But Brandon wasn't done sharing concerns. There's something else. My accountant thinks I'm being financially reckless. The foundation is spending faster than we projected, and if we add mobile outreach and keep growing, I'll need to commit more personal funds than originally planned. Veronica's stomach dropped. Brandon, I don't want you to sacrifice your financial security for this. Maybe we need to scale back, pace ourselves better. No, Brandon said firmly. We're not scaling back. I talked to my financial advisor. Even if I commit another $20 million to the foundation over the next 3 years, I'll still have more money than I could ever spend. I'd rather be slightly less wealthy and massively more useful. 20 million? Veronica breathed. That's an enormous commitment. It's an enormous need, Brandon countered. And I can afford it. What I can't afford is to have resources and do nothing with them while families struggle. I can't afford that morally or emotionally. Veronica felt tears threatening. You're really willing to do this? To commit so much? I'm not just willing. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Brandon pulled her close. You showed me what real wealth looks like. It's not money in an account. It's the ability to change lives. I'm richer now than I've ever been because I have purpose. Because I have you. Because every morning I wake up knowing today might be the day we help a family avoid disaster or achieve stability. That's wealth, Veronica. That's what matters. They held each other for a long moment, drawing strength from their partnership. Then Veronica's phone rang. It was Rosa. We have a situation, Rosa said, her voice tense. Ashley Williams, the young woman you helped on opening day? She's here and she's very upset. Can you come to the center? Veronica and Brandon drove to the community center immediately. They found Ashley in a consultation room, crying while Rosa tried to comfort her. Little Lily was in the childcare area, thankfully unaware of her mother's distress. Ashley, what happened? Veronica asked gently, sitting beside her. I lost my job again, Ashley sobbed. It's my fault. I was late 3 times this month because Lily was sick and the childcare here couldn't take her when she had a fever. My boss said he'd had enough of my unreliability. I tried to explain but he didn't care. Now I'm right back where I started. Unemployed, rent coming due, no money. Veronica's heart ached for her. Okay, let's breathe. This is hard, but it's not impossible. We'll help you the same way we did before. But that's just it, Ashley said, looking up with red, swollen eyes. You helped me before and I messed it up. Why would you help me again? I don't deserve it. I'm a failure. You're not a failure, Brandon said firmly, speaking for the first time since they'd entered. He knelt down in front of Ashley, looking her in the eye. You're a single mother dealing with a sick child and an unsupportive employer. That's not failure. That's life being hard. But I lost the job you helped me get, Ashley protested. So we'll help you get another one, Veronica said simply. Ashley, do you think you're the first person to face setbacks? You're not. Success isn't a straight line. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. We'll cover your rent again, Brandon added. And we'll work with our job counselor to find you employment with a company that has better sick leave policies. Some employers understand that parents have responsibilities. We'll find one of those. Ashley cried harder, but now it was relief mixed with the frustration. Why do you keep helping me? I don't understand. I'm nobody special. You're somebody's mother, Veronica said softly. You love your daughter. You're trying your best in difficult circumstances. That makes you special. That makes you worth helping. They spent the next hour developing a new plan for Ashley. Marcus, the job training coordinator, knew of a company actively recruiting administrative assistants and specifically seeking to hire single parents because the owner was a single mother herself. They'd offer flexible hours and generous sick leave. It was a perfect fit. I'll set up the interview for next week, Marcus said. In the meantime, the rent assistance will go through, and Ashley, I want you to stop beating yourself up. You're doing great. One setback doesn't erase all your progress. After Ashley left, calmer and more hopeful, Veronica and Brandon met with the staff to discuss systemic issues they were noticing. We're seeing a pattern, Rosa said. Families make progress, then hit obstacles that send them backward. Sick kids, unreliable transportation, employers who don't understand their situations. We help them recover, but how do we prevent the backsliding? We need to build more cushion into our assistance, Veronica said thoughtfully. Not just solve the immediate crisis but create reserves. What if every family we help gets enrolled in a matched savings program? We'll match whatever they can save, building up an emergency fund so the next crisis doesn't destroy them. I love that, Sarah said. It teaches financial skills while providing real security. And we need to partner with employers who actually support working families, Marcus added. Create a network of companies that offer flexibility, sick leave, and living wages. Connect our job seekers only with those employers. We could create a certification program, Brandon suggested. Companies that meet certain standards for family-friendly policies get certified as Hope and Kindness employers. We promote them, send them qualified candidates, and hold them accountable. The ideas flowed, the staff energized despite the challenges they'd faced that day. This was how they'd improve, by learning from each setback, each family struggle, each pattern they noticed. They were building something that evolved and adapted, not a rigid program but a responsive system. As Veronica and Brandon left the center that evening, she felt exhausted but determined. This is harder than I expected, she admitted. I thought once we opened the center we'd just help families and everything would be straightforward. But it's so complicated. People struggle in ways I didn't anticipate. We solve one problem and 3 more appear. That's because poverty isn't one problem, Brandon said. It's a web of interconnected struggles. Housing, employment, healthcare, childcare, transportation, education. Pull on one thread and the whole web shifts. We can't just fix one thing. We have to address everything. That's going to take years, Veronica said. Maybe decades. Then we'll work for years, Brandon replied simply. This isn't a project with an end date. It's a commitment. For as long as families need help, we'll be here providing it. For as long as I have resources, I'll use them to make this work. For as long as you're willing to lead this, I'll support you. Veronica stopped walking and turned to face him. What if I get it wrong? What if I make mistakes that hurt families? Then we'll learn from those mistakes and do better, Brandon said. Veronica, you're not going to be perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. The foundation isn't going to be perfect. But we're going to be good. We're going to be persistent. We're going to care. And that's enough. She kissed him then, right there on the sidewalk, grateful for his steady presence and unwavering belief. That night, as they discussed plans for the mobile outreach bus and the employer certification program, Veronica felt the challenge transforming into opportunity. Yes, the property deal had fallen through. Yes, Brandon's business associates questioned his choices. Yes, families like Ashley faced setbacks. But none of that meant they were failing. It just meant the work was real, difficult, and worthwhile. Hope and kindness weren't just pretty words. They were active choices, made over and over again in the face of obstacles. They were what Brandon showed when he committed more resources despite criticism. What Veronica showed when she helped Ashley again after a setback. What the staff showed when they brainstormed solutions instead of giving up. The challenges weren't going away. But neither were they. And together they were building something that would last. 6 months after opening day, the Hope and Kindness Foundation had become a cornerstone of the community. The mobile outreach bus was operational, bringing services to neighborhoods across the city. The employer certification program had recruited 37 companies committed to family-friendly policies. Over 1,200 families had been served, with countless success stories emerging. But the most important moment of those 6 months was about to happen, and it had nothing to do with statistics or programs. Brandon had been acting strangely all week, nervous and distracted. Veronica noticed but assumed it was stress from work. His business was doing well, but he'd stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus more on the foundation, and the transition was complicated. On a bright Saturday morning, Brandon picked Veronica up earlier than usual. "Where are we going?" she asked, noting he was dressed casually in jeans and a green sweater. "It's a surprise," he said with a mysterious smile. "Trust me?" "Always," she replied. They drove to a neighborhood Veronica recognized, where Tommy Rodriguez had fallen into the drainage ditch 6 months ago. But as they approached the construction site, Veronica gasped. It had been completely transformed. The dangerous, muddy ditch was gone. In its place was a beautiful community playground with bright equipment, safety surfacing, and benches for parents. Beyond the playground stood a newly constructed building, modern and welcoming, with a sign that read, Hope and Kindness Foundation Community Center East. "Brandon," Veronica breathed. "What is this?" "After the first property deal fell through, I kept looking," Brandon explained. "I found this lot, the exact place where everything started. The city sold it to the foundation at a discount because they were thrilled someone wanted to develop it into something that serves the community instead of luxury housing. We've been working on it for months." "You built a community center here?" Veronica asked, tears already streaming down her face. "Where I saved Tommy?" "Where you saved Tommy and inspired me to be better," Brandon corrected. "This is where our story began, Veronica. This muddy ditch was where you showed me what real courage and compassion look like. It felt right to transform this place into something that would help countless other families." They walked through the playground and Veronica noticed people gathering. Rosa and Miguel were there with Tommy. The Rodriguez family had become close friends over the months. Ashley Williams was there with Lily, both of them thriving now that Ashley had a good job with the Certified Employer Program. The Carter family was there, no longer homeless but in stable housing with both parents working. Staff members from the original center. Donors from the gala. Even Patricia Blackwell was there with her granddaughter Emily, who'd spent the summer volunteering and had become a passionate advocate for the foundation. "What's going on?" Veronica asked, confused by the crowd. Brandon took her hand and led her to the center of the playground, where a small platform had been set up. He helped her step up onto it, then joined her. The crowd quieted, all eyes on them. 6 months ago," Brandon began, his voice carrying across the playground, "a woman I'd never met changed my life. She saved a child from drowning in a muddy ditch. Then she showed up to our blind date covered in that mud, and instead of being embarrassed or making excuses, she told me the truth about what mattered more than making a good impression." He turned to look at Veronica, his gray eyes shining with emotion. That honesty, that courage, that commitment to putting others first, that's who Veronica Hayes is. Not just on extraordinary days when she saves children, but every day. In every interaction. With every family she helps. With every program she develops. With every decision she makes. Veronica felt her heart racing, beginning to understand what was happening. "Veronica, you showed me what real wealth looks like," Brandon continued. "It's not money or possessions or status. It's the ability to change lives. The commitment to help others. The courage to get muddy when someone needs you. You taught me that. You showed me who I wanted to be." He dropped to one knee right there on the platform, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The crowd gasped, some people crying already. "I love you," Brandon said simply. "I love your strength and your kindness. I love how you fight for families who can't fight for themselves. I love how you challenge me to be better, to do more, to matter." I love how you make me want to be worthy of you every single day. He opened the box, revealing a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious. A single diamond on a simple band, elegant and perfect. Will you marry me, Veronica Hayes? Will you be my partner in life like you're my partner in this foundation? Will you continue teaching me what matters, challenging me to be better, showing me what love really looks like? Veronica couldn't speak through the tears. She could only nod over and over, her hands covering her mouth. Yes, she finally managed. Yes, of course, yes. Brandon stood and slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her as the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, Veronica was laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe you did all this, she said, gesturing at the new building, the playground, the gathered friends and families. Wait, there's more, Brandon said with a grin. He nodded to Rosa, who approached the platform. Veronica, Brandon asked Tommy if he wanted to say something, Rosa said, lifting her son onto the platform. Tommy, now taller and more confident than he'd been 6 months ago, looked at Veronica seriously. You saved my life, he said in his small but clear voice. My mama says you're a hero. And Mr. Brandon says you're going to be his wife. I think that's good because heroes should be happy. Thank you for saving me. And congratulations. He handed her a small bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite, and Veronica burst into fresh tears, hugging him tightly. Thank you, Tommy. You're the brave one. As the celebration continued, people approaching to offer congratulations, Veronica pulled Brandon aside for a moment. When did you plan all this? She asked. I've been working on it for weeks, he admitted. The community center construction, arranging for everyone to be here, the proposal itself. I wanted everything to be perfect. It is perfect, Veronica assured him. But Brandon, you didn't have to build an entire community center just to propose. I didn't build it to propose, Brandon corrected. I built it because this community needs it. The proposal was just about celebrating where everything began and where we're going. This place brought us together. Now it's going to bring together countless families who need help and hope. They toured the new building with the gathered crowd, Veronica marveling at how complete it was. The layout was similar to their first center. Childcare area, job training center, consultation rooms, multipurpose spaces, food pantry and offices for staff. But this building also had something new. A large community room with walls designed for photographs and success stories. I want this to be a place that celebrates progress, Brandon explained. Where families can see that others have succeeded, that stability is possible. Hope displayed on walls so everyone who walks in knows they're not alone. Sarah approached with news. I've been fielding calls all week from people who saw the construction and want to know when this center opens. We already have a waiting list of families who need services. Then we'd better hurry up and get it operational, Veronica said, her mind already working through logistics and timelines. Actually, we can open Monday, Sarah said with a smile. Staff is hired and trained. Programs are ready. Systems are in place. We've been preparing for this for weeks. We just needed the building finished. Veronica looked at Brandon with wonder. You really thought of everything. I tried, he said. Though I'm sure you'll find things I missed. That's why I need you. To fill in the gaps I can't see. The celebration moved to Mr. Rossi's restaurant, where the Italian owner had closed to the public for the afternoon to host the foundation's engagement party. Tables were loaded with food, champagne flowed, and the room buzzed with joy and conversation. Patricia Blackwell approached Veronica and Brandon, her granddaughter Emily beside her. Congratulations to both of you, Patricia said warmly. And thank you. Emily has completely changed since volunteering with the foundation. She understands privilege differently now. She wants to study social work in college. Emily nodded enthusiastically. I want to do what you do, Veronica. Help families. Make a real difference. You showed me that's possible. The foundation will always have a place for you, Veronica promised. Sounds like we might be hiring our first college intern in a few years. As the afternoon wore on, Veronica found herself surrounded by the families they'd helped. Ashley Williams thanked her for not giving up when she'd faced setbacks. The Carter family shared that they'd saved enough for a deposit on a better apartment thanks to the matched savings program. Mrs. Parker, whose electricity had been restored on that first day, reported that her diabetic son's health had stabilized with consistent medical care. Story after story of changed lives, of hope restored, of kindness received and passed forward. Later, as the party wound down, Brandon and Veronica stood at a quiet corner of the restaurant. What are you thinking? Brandon asked, noting her thoughtful expression. I'm thinking about that first day, Veronica said. When I heard Tommy screaming, I had a choice in that moment. Keep walking to our date and arrive on time looking perfect. Or climb into that muddy ditch and help him. I'm very glad you chose the ditch, Brandon said with a smile. Me too. Because if I hadn't, Tommy might have died. But also I wouldn't have met the real you. The man who saw past the mud to who I was. Who chose to understand instead of judge. Who built all of this because one muddy woman told him about a rescue. You gave me more than I gave you, Brandon said seriously. You gave me purpose. Meaning. Well, a reason to wake up every day. What's money and buildings compared to that? Veronica rested her head on his shoulder. I love you. And I can't wait to marry you. To spend our lives building hope and kindness together. Speaking of the wedding, Brandon said, I have thoughts. But I want to hear your thoughts first. Small, Veronica said immediately. Meaningful. Maybe here at the new community center? With the families we've helped, the staff we've hired, the volunteers who've supported us. People who matter to both of us. That's exactly what I wanted, Brandon said, relief evident in his voice. I was worried you'd want something big and fancy. Nothing about us has been big and fancy, Veronica pointed out. Why would our wedding be different? Besides, I want the kids we've helped to feel welcome and included. I want Tommy to be there. And Ashley and Lily. And all the families who've become part of our story. They set the date for 3 months later, enough time to plan but not so long that anticipation became stress. The wedding would be at the new community center, with catering from Mr. Rossi's restaurant. Decorations would be simple but beautiful. No expensive band, just a local musician the foundation had helped get back on his feet. No designer dress, just a simple white gown that made Veronica feel beautiful. The wedding day arrived on a perfect afternoon in early spring. The community center had been open for 2 months and was already making a significant impact. The ceremony was set up in the main community room, where walls now displayed photographs of families the foundation had helped, their success stories a reminder of why Brandon and Veronica had found each other. Veronica walked down the aisle in her simple white dress, her mother beaming from the front row. She'd worried her mother would think the venue was too modest, but Patricia Hayes had cried when she saw the photographs on the walls. This is exactly right, her mother had said. This is who you are, baby. This is what you've built. Brandon waited at the altar in a navy suit, his eyes locked on Veronica as she approached. When she reached him, he whispered, You're beautiful. So beautiful. The ceremony was officiated by a minister from the local church who'd partnered with the foundation. His words focused on service, on partnership, on the biblical call to help others. Marriage is not just about 2 people, he said. It's about what those 2 people build together. Brandon and Veronica have already shown us what they build. Hope for the struggling, kindness for the forgotten, opportunity for the desperate. Their love for each other flows from the same source as their love for this community. They don't separate personal joy from public service. They understand that true happiness comes from making others happy. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Brandon promised to always value Veronica's wisdom over his wealth, to listen when she challenged him, to support her work even when it was hard. Veronica promised to help Brandon stay connected to what mattered, to celebrate his generosity, to build with him a life of purpose and meaning. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in cheers. Tommy Rodriguez led the celebration, jumping up and down with excitement. Ashley Williams wiped away tears. The Carter children shouted congratulations. Staff members applauded. Donors smiled. The reception was held right there, tables set up in the gymnasium where children often played basketball. The food was incredible, Mr. Rossi having outdone himself with multiple courses of Italian perfection. There was dancing, laughter, toasts that celebrated both the couple and the foundation they'd built. Rosa gave a toast that made everyone cry. 6 months ago, I watched my son nearly die in a muddy ditch. I thought my life was over, that I'd lost everything that mattered. Then this woman saved him. She risked her life for a child she'd never met. That courage inspired this man to be better, to do more, to help people like me who thought no one cared. She looked directly at Veronica and Brandon. You saved my son's life. But you also saved my hope. You showed me and hundreds of other families that kindness exists, that people care, that help is possible. Your marriage isn't just about your love for each other. It's about your love for all of us. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for showing us what hope looks like. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Veronica and Brandon stood in the doorway of the community center, thanking everyone for coming. When the last guest had left and the catering staff was cleaning up, they walked through the quiet building together. Remember when this was a muddy ditch where a child almost died? Brandon asked. Now it's a place where children play safely and families find help, Veronica replied. We did that, Brandon. We transformed tragedy into hope. We'll do that for the rest of our lives, Brandon promised. Find broken places and make them beautiful. Find struggling people and help them thrive. That's our purpose. That's our marriage. They drove to the original community center after leaving the new one, wanting to see where everything had started. The building was quiet, closed for the evening, but they had keys. They walked through the familiar halls, remembering the first day, the first families, the first successes. In Veronica's office, the walls were covered with thank you notes from families they'd helped. Drawings from children. Photographs of people celebrating new jobs, stable housing, successful milestones. Evidence of lives changed, hope restored, kindness multiplied. This is what we're building, Veronica said softly. Not just programs or services, but proof that people matter. That their struggles are seen. That help exists. Brandon wrapped his arms around her from behind. And we're just getting started. Imagine what the next 10 years will bring. More centers, more programs, more families helped. More hope and kindness spreading through the city. They stood together in silence, married now, partners in every sense of the word. Two people from completely different worlds who'd found each other through mud and rescue and a willingness to see past surface appearances to what really mattered. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Families struggled and celebrated, worked and rested, hoped and feared. But in this building and in the new one across town, something powerful was happening. Lives were being changed. Hope was being restored. Kindness was winning. And it all started because one woman chose to climb into a muddy ditch to save a child, then showed up to a blind date anyway, covered in proof of her courage and compassion. Sometimes the messiest beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. Sometimes getting dirty is exactly what changes everything. Sometimes hope and kindness, actively chosen and persistently practiced, can transform not just individual lives but entire communities. Brandon and Veronica Mitchell were living proof of that truth. And they were just getting started.